Okay, call the meeting to order for Finance Committee on April 4, 2013 at 7 p.m. Thank everyone who's here from the committee and from Planning Board planning staff and Amherst Media and everybody who's watching on Amherst Media. We're going to be focusing largely and almost entirely really on the warrant tonight in one fashion or another, in a lot of non-budget items, starting with some of the zoning articles that are on the warrant. And so I thank Rob Crowner for being here from Planning Board and Jonathan Tucker. And I'm going to turn it over to them. What the committee had by email and was distributed is just the sections we're talking about. It's not the complete warrant, but it has the zoning sections. But I think you have draft reports or final reports will tell us which they are. So I'll let you distribute them and then give us, if you can, a brief description of the purpose intended and comments about foreseeable financial consequences as you know them, knowing what our role is. And so with that, so we're starting with Article 30.
Okay, so Article 30 is just correcting the conflict that was created in the fall town meeting when we adopted two different sets of standards and conditions for converted dwellings. We first adopted the planning board's article related to converted dwellings that among other things required the ongoing services of a qualified professional property management company. While subsequently the town meeting also adopted a petition article related to standards and conditions for converted dwellings in which professional property management was not adequate, but rather owner occupancy or a resident manager was required. The obvious intent of town meeting was to limit it to owner occupancy or resident manager, so we're just going to delete the paragraph that refers to qualified professional property management. It really has no, I think, impact on anything other than the lawyers or something.
Any questions about this one? Actually, at times we've used such things as we've dubbed the term housekeeping, though I'm not sure exactly how we came to the term housekeeping for all of it. But I think that I think this falls into that category. But we've taken positions to favor it if we've come to the conclusion that the lack of clarity could cause litigation consequences because it leaves open a misunderstanding or potential problem that can be cleaned up very quickly by a town meeting action that could cause havoc down the line.
Right, so that's the purpose of my side comment there. Yes, I agree with you.
So, if there's questions from the committee to follow, this is just straightforward. Okay. Any comments from the committee?
I was just going to ask, in reading this about the public hearing, so the people who came to that supported this article?
Yes, I guess the public comment resulted in the bold language that you see on the front where resident manager is capitalized. That's just to reinforce that there's actually something that is defined as resident manager. There's no one who's opposed to this.
Ecological upheaval.
So I don't know if anyone from the committee wants to make a motion either to not take a position or take a position.
I have a question first, just to confirm what I thought I heard, which was if town meeting were not to pass this article, the conflict would still exist, and therefore a duplicative or unclear set of definitions exists, really, is what happens.
Yes.
And so that conflict could cause potential legal problems for us, because some could argue one is true and the other, depending on how they fell relative to the...
You would have conflicting instruction on how to deal with the management of the property.
So in a given, potentially difficult circumstance, if the board went one way, then the other side would perhaps have an upheaval and vice versa.
Exactly.
Okay.
Doug?
I move we recommend Article 30.
And the rationale?
Well, I didn't know if there's going to be a second.
I'll second.
Okay. So the idea being that I think with a clear conflict like this, that it's worth us taking a position, because if it does not pass, the potential for legal complications later that are going to, make work for the town and that sort of thing and have a cost are more likely. It's not as unlike other times when we might think it's a good idea, but we can't really make an economic determination about whether it'll have a positive or negative benefit. This is one where I think the conflict is pretty clearly a negative impact on the town's finances, to my mind anyway.
Janice?
Well, we really don't see any other financial consequence other than the possible litigation.
I would think that's right. In these, it's frequently the case because the goal isn't to actually change underlying policy, it's to clarify the statement of underlying policy. So it's hard to speculate for anything else because it doesn't have that purpose in mind. So we have a motion on the floor that it's made by Doug and seconded by Mary Lou to recommend Article 30. And Doug has already stated the reasons in the discussion, so I won't repeat it. I don't need to. Is there anything else on this article or motion? That said, all in favor indicate by raising hands. Okay, so it's 6, 1 0, 1 member absent. Okay, which is best to go to next?
I'll introduce 3 of them at once now. Articles 31, 32, and 35. These are part of a different approach that the planning board has taken to mixed-use center development. We consider it a more incremental approach and a more broad approach than we've attempted in the last couple of years. Where previously we had focused on particular village centers and suggested somewhat significant changes to those centers. We're now talking about making smaller changes, but over a wider area. So with that introduction, I'll just focus on Article 31 now. 31 would change the standards and conditions for the category of mixed-use building by raising the threshold under which a special permit is required for a building that contains both residential use and commercial use. Currently, mixed-use building is by site plan review, unless essentially you want to put 2 floors of residences above it, or if the building itself is large enough that it exceeds either 6,000 square feet footprint or 6 units of residence threshold. So since we actually want mixed-use buildings in our center districts, we think it's not a good idea to put such a low threshold on where the special permit kicks in. We'd like the site plan review to be higher. Because we're not going to get a large-scale retail operation. We're not going to get, and we don't necessarily want kinds of high-impact uses that are currently allowed in, for instance, the commercial district. So this proposal is intended to make it more economical to create a mixed-use structure, and as well, it ideally will provide a potential market for the commercial uses that we actually want in those buildings. So we're talking about raising the threshold from a residence gross floor area that is equal to the commercial gross floor area, or that is more than 6,000 square feet, or that has more than 6 units, to either 10 units of residence use, more than 10 units would require a special permit, or where the gross floor area is more than twice as big as the commercial gross floor area. So basically that's allowing 2 floors on a building. And the other change that is fairly significant is that whereas now we're not allowing any residential use on the ground floor of a mixed-use building, other than that which is incidental to the residential use, i.e. staircases or elevators or storage areas in some cases. We're proposing that there can be up to 40% of a ground floor mixed-use building devoted to residential use, and of that, no more than 15% can go to these ancillary purposes. So again, it's to make a mixed-use building more viable by allowing residence to take place in it on the ground floor. We would direct that residence use to the rear of the building, away from the streetscape. We want to keep a business streetscape in our commercial districts, but also allow for a more flexible use. I guess the financial impacts could be, it could go either way. I mean, it's a story that you've heard many times. We're hoping that this proposal will actually promote the construction of mixed-use buildings, thereby increasing the tax base, but as well it will increase the residential use, and that brings costs. We don't know what the cost is. Our aim here is not to determine, not to create an economic change in some way, but to do smart planning. That's what we think this is. So that's the summary.
Yes, go ahead.
And I asked this question, I'm pretty sure I keep this straight in my mind over the years, but just for clarity's sake. One of the primary distinctions between special permits and site plan review is that with a special permit, the project can be fully denied. Site plan review, the project can have constraints placed on it, but it's allowable. And so that's part of when you talk about a sort of lower threshold as far as create or allowing a project to happen. The developer knows in advance that it's going to be allowed. It's just going to have these design constraints potentially on it, and therefore, as long as those don't get beyond what they think are within their realm of capability, then it can the project can move forward.
Right, and I guess I should emphasize the kind of building that we're suggesting be allowed by site plan review, if this were to pass, could still be allowed, could still happen, but it would require a special permit. So we're not necessarily changing the potential density, we're just changing the threshold at which that density is allowed or is discretionary.
Yeah, okay.
Making it harder,
Making it easier.
easier.
Right now, to isolate a single threshold, if you hit 6 floors on the or 6 units on the upper floors, it goes from site plan review to special permit, from by right to discretionary. What we're doing is raising that threshold to 10 units. So that it could be by right through site plan review approval up to 10 units. The 11th unit makes it a special permit use.
Andrew?
These are complex things, and although it seems like on the surface fairly straightforward. Why? What are you trying to accomplish by doing this, and why now?
Okay, that's a good question. I probably should have been more thorough in my introduction. So, as you may know, a large part of what we think of as the North Amherst Village Center is actually zoned commercial, COM. And there's the only residential use that is allowed in a commercial district is in a mixed-use building. You can't have single-family homes, you can't have apartment buildings, you can't have townhouses. We want to promote vitality in our business districts, all of them. The COM district, whether it's COM or village center business, neighborhood business, all of them. In order to, as we understand it, in order to do that, in order to have the kind of vitality that we want, that is a pedestrian scale where people are living and working together in the same place, you need to have residential use. Having just commercial use is not working for Amherst.
So where is it? Where is it that we have 6 units, 6 residential units? How is it creating a constraint rate? Is that creating a constraint rate now? That by raising the threshold, they'll just create more of the. Is there some activity which is not being done because of this
Yes.
current?
Yes.
Yes.
And so if it goes from 6 units to 10 units, then people will just jump in and then you suddenly start getting volumes.
We have had the current regulations for a decade or more, and in North Amherst Village, there have been no mixed-use developments for nearly 30 years. There have been 4 or 5 in the entire town. Several of those were special permit. They were building something larger. And it is also the case that residential, I was going to say before, that in a number of ways, having more residential units by right makes a project more financially feasible. It reassures those who are going to finance it, the banks and so forth, that they're going to be able to, if they invest in this, it's going to happen. It also, because right now the commercial market is strained, is weaker than the residential market, the addition of the residential units to a building makes it a going concern sooner.
But I actually understand that, and I think there is need for that kind of housing in this town. So I'm still supportive. I'm just trying to understand. So in North Amherst, so like in the carriage shops, for example, or no, that's not North Amherst. But would it be?
We sent around, and maybe it got stopped here. A series of maps.
I'm trying to get see an example to understand. Because so what I'm understanding now is because of the 6-unit limit,
Right.
it is constraining action on the part of developers. There are developers waiting in the line who, when they see the thing change from 6 to 10, they will start building. Is that what the motivation for this is?
That is one of the thresholds that we think is representing an obstacle. There are also a couple of other thresholds in there that are being removed. It is also the case that right now there is a constraint on the amount of ground floor area that can be used for anything ancillary to the upper floor residential units, and that is 10%. Conversations with local architects indicate that that's not enough room for a stair and an elevator for a smaller building.
So how tall will the building have to be to put 10 units on it? So if it's a front like this big a front to the street.
It's the other way around. It's how big can the building be? There's a height limit in these zoning districts of three floors and 40 feet.
So can you put 10 units in one commercial for
if
one?
you have a building that's big enough, you could have 2 stories of 5 units each or more.
Okay.
If the building is big enough. It's not going up. It's going laterally. That gets you the area.
So for a commercial space about this big, they will have
Some of the commercial blocks around the Common have about that balance.
Okay.
Although some of those have 4 floors rather than 3.
Okay. So 10 unit. Well, I'm thinking like why not 12? Why not 8?
Well,
why 10?
We had one example that was brought before the planning board, and this I'll tell this because I think it illustrates some of the economic as well as other constraints. Right now, the other thing that is the case is that in these 2 districts, the commercial district and the limited business district in particular, for any residential use at all, including on upper floors, there's a minimum lot area that's required for the first unit, and then additional lot areas that are required for each subsequent unit. There was a developer looking at a property in Amherst who was trying to design a building, and found that they could have a nice sized building with 3 floors in it, but the upper 2 floors, they could only have 4 apartments in the building because of the size of the lot. And those had to be huge apartments, which would end up with many bedrooms.
Size of the lot, size of
the size of the property on which the building sits is a limitation. That's one of the limitations being removed by this. That there is a provision in the bylaw that superscript B or footnote B to table 3 for those who are following along at home, that relieves all residential uses except for converted dwellings and subdividable dwellings from the minimum lot area and additional lot area requirement. And that is being proposed for this, so that it's not dependent so much on the lot area, but how big you can get the building in terms of building coverage and lot coverage, in terms of the number of units.
So 10 units will mean like 10 parking spots?
Would mean the nominal default requirement currently is 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. There would also be parking required for the square footage for the commercial uses, based on those can be waived or modified by the permit granting body, again, depending on the size of the lot and whether there's parking adjacent or whether there's a bus stop out front. There are a number of factors that can enable the permit granting body to adjust that. So in general, the changes here are intended to introduce more flexibility than the current regulations allow, so that we can actually have some of these buildings be built.
If I may.
A radical notion.
I move that we take no position on Article 31.
I second it.
The reason being that well, I think it certainly fits in with the master planning process, the master plan, the planning that goes with that. You know, the net positive or negative effect of the town is hard to judge, if any. Hopefully it's positive. It seems like it would be. So again, I don't know, I said I'm generally sort of in favor of this, but from a committee standpoint, I think it's not clear the negative or positive impact in it, and it's certainly not in a significant sort of way that I think that we need to take a position.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of the motion on the table, because I think I believe we have previously talked about these zoning articles where it's very difficult to know what the impact is going to be. But I'm also coming around to the view, boy, this town needs residential units. It's a real, you know, from a finance committee's perspective, you know, with all the financial pressures on the town, we do need financial units. So I don't know, I'm supportive of the motion on the table because of the difficulty in putting numbers to costs and benefits and potential benefit to the town. But I do want to make a statement that this town badly needs residential units. So
you are seconding? Is that?
Janice.
Oh, am I supposed? Janice already
No,
seconded.
Janice seconded. I didn't hear Janice's second.
I'm just making this point because I think we are all kind of in the same. I don't think there's much difference in the way we think about this, which is that we want to support more growth in town for property, and we are constrained by our mandate to be very specific about the cost and benefits.
See, I guess I disagree, because I don't think that we're required to be specific, and I think that's where there's been a disagreement in the committee for several years now, because we never can know unless there's a specific proposal on the table. But what we do know is that under the circumstances of the present zoning, nothing has happened, and that there's a desire within sound town planning and for financial benefit reasons to have mixed-use development and to get both commercial and residential in areas where it is sound to have that mixed-use development, that there is financial benefit because it would bring taxation. There has been no construction. This looks to me to be a responsible attempt to use the smart planning techniques to promote the development of these mixed-use developments. And what we do know is that we're going to be going from essentially almost no taxation, because most of it is just blank land that we're talking about where this is likely to go, to something that's going to be a significant piece of property with a significant taxable value. And so we don't have a ledger sheet that says this is what the exact benefit would be, because you can't have that, because you don't know exactly what the proposal would be. But if it's a 10-unit building with commercial involved, you would estimate that it would certainly be several $1 million worth of value to the EQV, to the tax value and the taxation that comes with that, and that is a significant amount, and it's a significant amount in comparison to what is likely to be collected there right now, which is next to nothing. And for that reason, I tend to still feel that the Finance Committee does not need the kind of fine analysis that's impossible to have, and that it would be really wrong to have, because that would almost require that there be somebody proposing a specific development and the zoning is being created to allow specific development. And I think that's contrary to sound zoning. Zoning is about planning and making something possible. So for those reasons, I guess I just don't have the same view. Doug?
Can I withdraw my motion? Because I generally side with you on this particular issue, and I had thought about when I suggested the motion, I was thinking along the lines of that. This doesn't change, while it might promote new growth. I wasn't sure that it would necessarily promote new growth, but in hearing your argument, I'm thinking more that this creates an environment of a more positive environment for growth, which is something we generally support in a more active way than no position. So I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Before you do that, excuse me, let us finish the discussion.
Very good.
I'd like to chime in.
You may, and then what I'm going to do after you speak is then Janice has the right to turn her second into a motion and see if there's another seconder. And I don't want to leave her without that opportunity because she obviously had seconded it for a reason. And so I think that it's important, but go ahead, Mary Lynn.
But we don't know, and I think that's going back to what Doug said. And I agree with Honor, we need to support, not we need to support, but we encourage building in that for revenues. But an example of thinking we had something was the Southeast Street, the Rock Farm, was zoned, stayed zoned. They had a plan, it went through all the processes. Now it's going to become conservation land. So we don't know, I guess that's my point. With all of this, it may or may not happen, and I think I agree that I would rather stay neutral on it and support the growth in town, but not through zoning, because I don't know that that can happen.
Yeah, and the only response I'll say is I don't think zoning normally assures anything. It just makes something more likely than not. So then I turn it to Janice for the reasons previously stated.
I still would want to take no position, because even though you don't know specific numbers, you don't really know if it will be a positive or negative. I know they built, I think in South Amherst near the package store, is that a mixed use? Mm-hmm. And is that all rented out?
Yeah.
But I heard that
it was a challenge.
Having a lot of trouble.
It was a challenge for a while, but it's rented out. As I say, there are 3 or 4 or 5 of these buildings in Amherst. But they're hard to build for the reasons.
Are these for existing buildings or is it for new development? Or is it for, well?
Either. It could be a renovation or rehabilitation of an existing building.
Because, there is actually quite a, in my view, a bit of a distinction between those, because if it is an existing building, we know that the town services are getting to that building. Otherwise the building wouldn't be built. And there'll be water and electricity and everything is and the roads are kind of going to the building, chances are. If it is a new building, then it might require town to put those roads and sewage and stuff to that new development. Is that
the zoning? If I may, the zoning districts that are involved all have utilities now. They're in centers that have had utilities for a long time. There may be a need in some instances, depending on the size or the scale of the development, to improve those, and often that falls to the developer, though not always. But in most cases, we're talking about the limited business and the commercial districts in Amherst, and those have utilities.
And John, is that what's in red on this?
Yes,
yeah, so that kind of takes away an uncertainty about how much it would cost the town to provide services to this building. I think that's, so that I think is pretty significant. Because if it's a new development for this, where, because you're talking about costs and benefits. The costs are, what are the costs to the town of providing those basic town services to this building? Does that change from this zoning law change? And I'm thinking no, it doesn't, because they already have these services. It's just a matter of upgrading them. That's the regular regular operations. Is that true, or is it?
Well, in a way, although, as I say, the places where this rezoning is occurring already, for the most part, have all of the utilities that they would need. And though they may in some cases need upgrading, part of the intent of this and the other changes that will be described in a minute is to concentrate new development of these kinds when it occurs in existing centers where there are existing utilities, rather than allowing it to occur somewhere out where you would have to extend utilities to it. It would also be the case, I don't know if this helps or hinders, but if there was any significant utility work or infrastructure work that was needed, the town would probably apply for grants to do that rather than pay for it entirely itself. It would have some investment, but it would not be bearing the complete cost.
That's helpful to know. Because what I'm thinking in a broad brush, rough back of the envelope thinking about this, if the costs are, the potential costs of the town are limited, and the benefits are from the taxes that might happen because of the number of units and the activity, rental activity, and we know there's the market for rental is pretty strong in this town because of all the student population that we've been reading about in the newspapers. So on balance, the chances are, there's no certainty, but the chances are this will be a positive benefit to the town. I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess what we need is to know that there's a second to the motion. Because you have a motion on the floor, as we left it, Doug went through his motion, but you made your second into a motion, so I need to know if there's a second.
I second.
Okay, so now there's a motion on the floor. Yes, James.
So you're talking about the town perhaps getting grants or whatever to upgrade infrastructure
If it's needed.
to benefit a private developer?
To benefit an area so that the entire area is benefited from utilities. If it is only going to benefit an individual property owner or a small area, then it would be most likely the cost would be borne by the developer themselves.
The best example that I can think of, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, Jonathan, is that if there had been significant development previously in North Amherst, there would have been a better chance that we would have received the grants to do the sewer and water work under Pine Street, which we're now having to ask town meeting to approve bonds from the enterprise funds. So that
it's a direct example.
So that's the example that you would have gotten, and the purpose, the zoning and the promotion and the development would have then led to the grants that would have actually saved the town from incurring that expenses and provided the water and sewer into an area that could then encourage improvement of other natures besides the specific whatever was constructed.
I just have one, if you want to catch this now, on your
Yes,
page 3, under public hearing, second paragraph, down, and 3 lines up from that paragraph, should be taken to promote missing businesses and services. I think you want to say mixing businesses and services.
No,
You do want
in
to
this
say
case, it's intended to mean that there are businesses and services that are missing, and that if the measures are taken, they will be missing no longer. But we could rewrite that. Thank you. Town full of proofreaders.
Okay. Anything else on the motion that's on the floor, which is a motion to take no position? Okay.
I don't know how I'm going to vote on this because it could, increasing residential development, increasing number of residents in this area, concentrated, could end up increasing town costs if people move in and have school children. That's that would be an increased town cost. And again, I think it's hard to tell. I was not ready to take a vote on this tonight because it's the first time we've seen the land board reports, and I wanted to mull it a little bit, but if we take a vote, we take a vote. And I'll have to figure out which way to go.
procedurally, you know, the motion you could make if you wanted to do so. So, yeah. Janice?
I think if we do vote to take no position, we can still, in our presentation, explain positives and the negatives.
Which is that we don't know.
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I was pretty strong in my views earlier about the zoning articles. And, you know, what has changed is that, you know, I'm just becoming more aware of all these stresses which are not only in our budget but in our town because of the shortage of rental properties for students, and you know, those stresses we can't really ignore because financial decisions cannot be in isolation of what's happening around us. And what's happening around us is there's a great need and demand for residential rental property for students and things like that. So I'm actually inclining in this view to actually support this with the view that the cost side of the ledger, even though we don't know what they are, seems like pretty routine and manageable because the towns, but these areas are already serviced by the town for the utilities and things like that. So that side is manageable, and the potential benefits are actually quite significant because we know that if these properties are built, chances are they will be rented out. So because they will be rented out, they will be built, which means there will be property taxes for the town. So I want to kind of, you know, I'm just, you know, thinking aloud here. I want to tone down my earlier opposition to not taking any position on zoning articles. If it was a new development where there was a good chance that we would have to develop town services to get to that point to enable that thing to actually happen, then I would probably stick to my earlier thinking about not taking a position on this. But since they're talking about areas which are already developed, which are already commercially zoned, so I'm not seeing the cost to the town as that big of an obstacle here.
Really?
Well, last week we asked for, evidence, and so maybe I will go with K, and I'll make the motion to postpone till next week, and perhaps between now and then we can find out how many rental units are still available in town. That may answer your question. That are unoccupied.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. My sense is everything I read in the local newspapers is there's a shortage of rental units in town.
I would direct you to, on the town website, to the Housing and Sheltering Committee webpage under the living section or under the committee section of the website, and look at the housing production plan just recently completed, which talks about rental vacancies. For the first couple of decades I worked here, the vacancy for rental property units in Amherst was regularly less than 1% because the demand was so high. In the last few years it has wandered up in the 3 and 4% range. I don't know where it is right now.
Vacancies,
which means it's transitory. They're vacant for the moment. We are about to, a great deal of this is in flux. We're about to ask town meeting to adopt a bylaw that will allow the permitting and registration of all rental units in Amherst, which will better organize, is the intent, all of the existing regulatory ways in which the town addresses rental property. We hope that will have a salutary effect on all of it, including the daylighting of a lot of units that nobody knew existed in odd places in buildings. But also that will have some impact, although not great, probably, on the housing supply, the rental housing supply. I would note we are in the midst now of the rental market study, which is the companion study, and we anticipate having some numbers back from those consultants prior to town meeting. It's the contention based on both real and anecdotal information of staff and others that there is a very strong market, although hardly anything could be as strong as the student rental market for non-student rentals in Amherst. The Boltwood Place building, when it was being built and advertised, had hundreds of people inquiring. And it was not rented to students, it's rented to grown-ups, to adults, hundreds, and it's market rate units, it's not affordable. They had a waiting list of over 100 and hundreds of inquiries, and that's a real world thing. So there is a demand out there for housing other than student housing. The town hasn't built significant or meaningful amounts of housing in 20 years, and I just want to provide that as some of the context for this.
So where we are at, I'll just pause for a second because if somebody made a motion to postpone consideration to a future meeting, that takes precedence to allow to be considered before the motion that's on the floor. If I don't hear a motion of that type, then we're ready to vote. I think the motion on the floor.
Oh, heck, I'm gonna move to postpone to a future meeting, postpone our decision. Sorry, James.
That's fine.
I'll second that.
So Kay has moved to postpone,
circle.
and Doug has seconded. Any further discussion needed on the motion?
Well, the quick discussion is that Mary said she needs some numbers, so would you specify what numbers we should get and how we should get those?
Well, Jonathan has already given us some, but I would get some information from you as where to look, and I can check with some realtors. I'll take that on myself. I know Andy's busy and so others, but maybe get some information. I can talk to Sandy where to get information too and pursue that and get it back to the committee so we can vote hopefully next week.
So on motion to postpone, all in favor indicate by raising hands. Okay, so 6-0, one member absent, postpone. Thank you for helping us in the very long, complex discussion, but a lot came out. It was very helpful. Thank you. So, onwards.
Okay, so the next one is Article 32, and this deals with the dimensional table for mixed-use centers. Dimensional table specifies lot coverage, building heights, and things like that. What we're hoping to do with this article is to both make loosen the dimensional restrictions on the zones BLCOM, BBC, and BG, and begin to introduce or continue to introduce elements of form-based design regulations that we started looking at a couple of years ago. So what we're suggesting is that where we have a minimum setback in those zones, we change that to a setback that has both a minimum and a maximum.
If I may, rather than trying to read your way through 8 pages, the very last page has a table that compares existing dimensions with proposed dimensions.
So a range for setback rather than a minimum with no maximum. We're proposing that it needs to have both a minimum or a maximum and a maximum. That's to encourage or require that buildings be built close to the street. Again, that's to create the kind of pedestrian-friendly mixed-use centers that people have said over and over again that they want, and which are generally accepted as smart planning and desirable urban development. Likewise, where there's a maximum height, we're proposing in 2 of the zones a range that has a minimum and a maximum. That's also to require that a business streetscape have buildings that have a certain scale. We don't want small single-story buildings in our business centers. We want them to have a certain scale. And we're also proposing, in that case, to raise the maximum height a few feet, 5 feet exactly in each district. That's to allow more flexibility in building the kinds of buildings that we build nowadays. For several of the dimensions, we're proposing to add footnote A, which allows the special permit granting body to waive or modify the dimensions to meet the context of the neighborhood where the proposal is being made. Again, it's to provide flexibility to reach the kind of form of buildings that we want in mixed-use centers. The changes to basic minimum lot area and additional lot area per family in the BLCOM and BVC districts, these would apply to converted dwellings or subdividable dwellings. Converted dwellings are existing buildings, and that might be converted into residential use, multiple unit residential use. What this basically allows is for those buildings to exist on a slightly smaller lot. That's all it does really. There's still a limit of 4 units in a converted dwelling. Doesn't necessarily add a lot of units. It just allows them to exist on a smaller lot. This article will be proposed in such a way that it'll be easily divided. We can vote on each of those districts separately. The other major thing that this article would do, in addition to the one that Mr. Tucker noted earlier, which is to extend the restriction against minimum lot area applying to buildings in business zones to the COM and BL zone, which doesn't now. That's footnote B. Is to more fully define how the height is measured for buildings, or actually make it more flexible. The way we measure height right now is to the highest point of the roof. But since we want, what that means is that a pitched roof actually allows less volume in the building, because you're measuring to a building that is restricted on the top. It inadvertently or perhaps intentionally promotes flat roofs, which are fine for certain kinds of buildings. But when we think about a village center, we're thinking about an old New England village center that has old buildings that have pitched roofs. I mean, so we want to promote that. We want to somehow make it so that those kinds of buildings can exist in our mixed-use centers. So we're proposing that the height now be measured to the average point of a pitched roof, the average between the eave and the peak. It's a standard measurement in many places that we're suggesting to adopt here. And we're including a diagram. I don't know if that's in the...
it's not in the report, but it's in the warrant.
Okay. Adding a diagram to the bylaw so that you can easily see how to measure various kinds of pitch roofs.
So is the purpose of 32 similar to the purpose of 31?
It is. It's all intended to both make our mixed-use centers more vibrant, more vital, have more things going on, and to encourage the kind of development, that is the form of development that we want to see, and that our form-based design consultants suggested people want.
And what was the reason then for having it be two separate articles if they're so closely intertwined?
Well, one deals with standards and conditions for a particular kind of use, and one is dealing with the dimensional table for all of the business zones. So it's doing two different. It's approaching the issue from two different places.
Okay, other questions?
I have a question about
Yeah.
if these are rented to families, is there any requirement for a yard, for play areas for children?
There is a requirement in the fundamental dimensional requirements that you not cover more than a certain amount of a lot with buildings and buildings plus impermeable surface. There has to be some green space. It's not specified in the dimensions, but in the criteria that would be used either under a special permit or a site plan review approval for looking at a residential proposal, that would come up as an issue and would need to be dealt with. If these were included family units, or for that matter, anybody's units, all sorts of people want to have a little garden by the door, or possibly on the site, and or recreation space on the site if it's possible. It would be dealt with in the permit process. It's not specifically required in the dimensions. Different parts of the bylaw do different things.
So I guess I'm confused then about if you have a size lot and you're allowing a bigger footprint to cover more area, then
There are no change, if I may, there are no changes in either the amount of coverage that a building can have on a lot, or that a building plus impermeable surfaces can have on a lot, or that are being proposed. What are being proposed are locational changes. For instance, that you can get, rather than, right now, what we have in all districts is for instance, a minimum front setback. That is to say, you can't come any closer to the front of the street with a building, but there's no maximum. So you can put the building on the back of the property if you want to. And in many cases, we have, in some of our commercial and limited business districts, they developed as highway strip commercial areas rather than as village centers. And so the buildings are set way back and all the parking is out front. And what we're trying to do is sort of reverse that and say, if you're going to put a new building in, or if you're going to put an addition, and we'll get to that in a minute, an addition on an existing building, we want you to start turning this into a village center instead of a highway strip area. Create pedestrian space, including along the street, little plazas and so forth. That's, again, it's not in the numbers of the dimensional requirements, but it would be in the requirements of the bylaw in other places, and it would be addressed during the permit process.
thank you.
And these are business zone dimensions, not residential zone dimensions. So it's business oriented.
So I guess the question I would have for the committee, if it made sense to postpone consideration on 31, should we also postpone consideration on 32, since they seem to be stated to serve a related purpose?
Well, just one comment on that. In the previous one, there was, the number of units, the threshold was increased from 6 to 10, and that marginal additional number of units means like more potential town tax, property taxes. This one has no impact on property taxes.
Yes.
I think it might be more accurate to say it has probably less impact, but I wouldn't say that it has no impact.
Why would it have an impact?
So we're trying to create an atmosphere where people want to be, where people want to live, where people want to put their stores. And so if it's a friendlier place, hopefully there'll be more development. So it's more vague,
It's a second
What's
order
the-
effect.
Yes,
The previous one is the first order effect,
I agree.
and so I think that's maybe the difference. So if it is nice area and active and a lot of activity going on, then people will want to live there. Then they'll build more. That's that's a little bit of more of a stretch. That versus that you allow them to build 10 versus 6 now, so they'll build more, which means there'll be more property taxes.
Okay.
So I see that distinction.
So, there is no motion on the floor. And do you know if anybody is making a motion?
We don't need a motion, do we? I mean, if we don't take a vote today, we'll
Yeah.
Take one another day.
take one another day.
Okay, well, if there's nobody's making a motion, I will take it for myself to ask for consideration of 32 after we take up consideration of the motion that was postponed on 31.
And I just
Yes.
want to clarify, for me to postpone doesn't mean that I don't think it's good. It's just a matter of, is it something we should be involved with, or, should you go forward? Because it's not that I would move to vote against.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a recommendation one way or another. I'm just
Okay,
helping
I
you
just
make your
want to be
decision.
clear. I mean, I'm really
Right.
trying to focus on what I think how we should handle it.
Okay, so then, does that take us to 33?
Well, I'm gonna skip to 35 because this is
Okay.
this is the third part of our package.
Is there 35?
35 exists only as a map right now,
Oh, the
or a
map.
diagram.
35 has not yet been, a public hearing has not yet been held by the planning board. It will be held on the 17th of April. So there is no report yet. There's a diagram here to help illustrate some of the principles of it.
No hearing. In fact, the planning board has not yet made a recommendation either, obviously. But the idea here is to introduce one of the more prescriptive and somewhat defining pieces of form-based design regulations that we looked at the last few years. And that's the siting of buildings. We talked about that in the previous article with a minimum and maximum setback requirement. Now we're talking about what happens when a building, when there's an addition or an expansion of an existing building that has become non-conforming as a result of the new setback requirements.
Or anything else.
Or if for any other reason that it's not conforming, yes. What we're proposing to require is that any expansion or addition is going to have to start bringing the building up to that setback requirement there. The diagram shows you the current 20-foot minimum setback for the Wetrugas building on Sunderland Road, the blue line in the middle. Our proposed a range of setback, 10 to 30 foot, 10 minimum, 30 maximum, would require any new building to come up to either to somewhere in that range. But this article would require an addition or expansion of that building to also come up to that setback range. The language is somewhat complicated, and we're still finalizing it, but that's the intended effect.
I would note that this would not impact buildings that were conforming. So that this only deals with buildings that are non-conforming either as a result of passage of some of the articles we've just discussed, or it's non-conforming in some other way. And then if someone wants to make an alteration to it, an addition or whatever, they are required to try and bring it into conformity with the front setbacks.
And so, yeah, let me actually explain more of the reason for that. So if you look at this building, you have a building that is set well back of the proposed setback. We don't, and so it makes a very weak streetscape there. What we don't want is for this building to expand in the same plane, north or south. We want any expansion to come west, so that it starts to build a streetscape.
One way of looking at that on the back of this is a Google Earth crow's eye view of the same building, and the new range of front setback really encompasses the depth of the first row of parking. So if you were building that building new, you would want to bring that in. Just grab a hold of that building and pull it up to a point where it is either touching the back edge of those parking spaces or is somewhere within those parking spaces. And that's what you want. You then have enclosed the streetscape. You've created opportunities for small pedestrian plazas and so forth, places to sit, ways to engage with the facades of the building in terms of storefronts and so forth.
And where would that be?
This would apply in all mixed-use business districts.
New developments.
New additions or enlargements of existing non-conforming buildings.
So if this, let me understand, so if this building was to be, an addition was to be put on this building,
Right.
you would want it to be put in the front?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm a little bit more uncertain about this one than I am about the other one for a very simple reason that I don't know, and I don't know how any of us would know that would be more or less likely that somebody would build a mixed-use building because they had the less setback requirement or the more setback or had more setback permissiveness within the zoning. I think it is sound planning. It promotes an attractive area, but it's harder for me to quite make that extra assumption that it would actually lead to the promotion of more development.
If I may, I think that somewhat misstates what this article is doing. The earlier article, the mixed-use center dimensions article, the numbers are escaping me at the moment, but is the one that was making the changes you're referring to. What this article, Article 35, would do is say, if there was a building, whether or not these proposed other changes occurred, if there was a building and it was non-conforming, and it was in these districts, and somebody went to put an addition on it, or to enlarge it, or to otherwise expand it, they would have to expand it in a way that better addressed the streetscape. That's what it's doing. It's a form-based design measure.
The concern I have is not, I mean, you need a way to encourage non-conformance to become conforming. The difficulty I have is that it does force the development, which is in some ways its intent, but it also, depending on the building, that may be an undue burden, so it may prevent development. I could see cases where that could be the case, where an expansion in the forward direction toward the street, given the construct and workflow of the building, would be prohibitive. So but I could also argue that that's not a significant factor, or not one we need to concern ourselves with, or whatever. So I want to think about this a bit more. But that's the one off the top of my head that I think about, and so you've got an example here, and that's really another key thing. I don't know if they're thinking about making any changes to their building or not, but it's an example that suits the case that's under consideration. There could be, there are other buildings in that neighborhood that have similar sorts of layouts that the direction toward the street could be not conducive relative to how the rest of the building is constructed. Not necessarily from a structural standpoint, but just from a operating the business within that. kind of circumstance. So I'm going to have to think about this a little bit more.
So I have a couple of responses to that. Well, one is that part of the reason that you don't see language here is because we are working on an escape valve that would allow flexibility, especially to allow for what we're describing.
That should actually be in the warrant.
Oh, okay, so you do have one. And the second thing is that I would like you to think of these 3 articles as a package. But rather than putting them all together in one article, which people had a problem with in the past, we're breaking them up. So there's some give and there's some take, and that's we want people to understand that and to give some, knowing that they're going to get some, and vice versa.
Okay.
Rob, the packages, articles 30, 31, and 35.
31, 32, and 35.
31, 32.
So, support of one article and not support of the others undermines the entire package?
Not necessarily. I mean, for some people it would. Other people no. I mean, it's sort of.
Yeah,
They
they
do different things.
Yeah, they
Each
do.
one does
They do
different
different things, and I think that's really the point. Because they do different things. From at least my mind, at least we'll talk about this again when the numbers are here. But in my mind, there's more direct financial consequence of one versus the others. So although I feel like I'm supportive of all of them, or at least not opposed to them from a finance committee point of view, I can see supporting one and being silent in the others.
Anything else on this? And I will sort of decide if I'm not hearing any motions around one more time.
They haven't done it yet as a committee, I believe he said.
That's correct.
So,
We won't until August 17th. Or
August 17th.
April 17th.
Wow, that would be
It
so.
that would be a long
Just-
time to
It's gonna
think
be a long
about it.
town meeting.
It just feels like August.
It's got to be a long time meeting, but not that long.
Who knows?
Well, who knows?
We've gone into July.
Okay. Ready for the next one?
Yes.
Next one, we'll go back to 33 now. This is another change to section 9 of the zoning bylaw, which deals with non-conforming uses and structures. In this case, it's what has often been called a technical fix. It's attempting to address some shortcomings in the current language that the building commissioner, our new building commissioner, has pointed out and has requested action from planning board and town meeting on.
No, excuse me.
Yep.
Are you talking about 34 now or 35?
33.
33.
The handouts are getting ahead of
Remember we jumped,
Okay, we're on 31 here.
we jumped to 35, we're back to 33.
Sorry.
So the question is, how does the building commissioner, and how does the planning authority deal with non-conforming structures that are do not necessarily make a significant, that changes to which would not make a significant impact on the building itself as far as how it fits in with the surroundings. But because it's non-conforming, requires a special permit, and that often means that it has to go before 2 boards, or it has to go before a board at all when it maybe shouldn't have to or something. Because the changes are so minor that they're not, no one would notice if there hadn't been a hearing. So what the article is proposing to do is hopefully summarize this in 3 points. One is to define what a structural alteration is. And that language is in the bylaw, but it's not really defined. And people probably have their own ideas about what structural alteration is. What we want it to mean in this case is something that significantly affects the outside of the building. And what we're talking about are non-conforming buildings. What we don't want to have to do is someone wants to replace the windows to have to come and get a special permit to do that. But if they want to put on a deck or something, that you want to consider structurally altering enough to trigger a hearing. The second thing is we want to align the treatment of how the building commissioner handles such applications for structural alteration, for dealing with changes that do not exacerbate non-conforming conditions in business zones in the same way that he currently does for residence zones. A number of years ago, town meeting allowed the building commissioner to issue a permit without having to go for a special permit, issue a building permit that didn't change a non-conforming, didn't exacerbate a non-conformity without having to get a special permit to do so in residence zones. That should also be the case in business zones, particularly in the downtown where almost every building is non-conforming in one way or another. And finally, we want to allow the board that issues the permit for the use of a non-conforming building to also issue the special permit that is required for the use change in that structure that would otherwise require a special permit because it's non-conforming. I like zoning, but this stuff is very difficult to.
It gets a little thick. A change in a non-conforming building requires a special permit one way or another. That's state law. What we're trying to do is line it up so that if the use requirement requires a special permit, then the special permit for the change in the nonconformity is issued by the same board. If the use requires a site plan review approval by the planning board instead, then the planning board issues the special permit to deal with the nonconformity. The notion is to prevent applicants from having to go to two boards to essentially get one permit to do one thing, and have them, the potential for the boards disagreeing with each other, the applicant having to bounce back and forth trying to convince one board to do it one way, another board to do it another way. The town meeting has been making changes like this for a decade and a half at least, trying to line up the process so that the same board who issues the permit for whatever the use is issuing any special permit for a change or modification in the use, in this case dealing with the nonconformity.
So this would be, if there was a financial question of efficiency, not just for the permit applicant, but for the town staff that are dealing with it.
Right.
That's the principal
It's easier
thing.
to deal with one board than two, in terms of process, for instance.
Yes.
But when you have to have two, don't you have to pay 2 fees?
Yes.
So we're losing it.
No, you still have to apply, you would still have to apply, if, let me use the example, if the use was by, proposed use, it was changing the building in some way, even if all it was the new use was moving into the building, and it was non-conforming, required a site plan review approval from the planning board, you'd have to apply for site plan review approval. Since it's a non-conforming building, you also have to apply for the special permit. In those instances, you'd have to make 2 applications, you'd have to pay 2 fees. In the instance where it was a special permit in both cases, the use and the nonconformity, it might be that the applicant could petition the board to say, I'm doing a special permit already, just let me have 1 fee here, and then it's up to the board to decide. So I I don't think we're losing anything by lining things up this way. You still, in some of the cases, you still have to have permit fees in both, for both permits, or for each permit.
I think what Andy said though about staff time makes
Yes.
more sense.
So is there, can we thought on this one?
We struggle with our division.
Yeah. This is, have you quantified the staff time savings that are likely to occur in any event? Can you estimate how many hours we're talking about that staff would be duplicating that would be eliminated by this?
I can tell you that if you had to go to 2 boards, it would roughly double the amount of staff time and effort involved. You have to do the meeting notices, even if it's a joint hearing, they have to be, legal ads have to go out separately, so forth.
Okay.
I'd be inclined to support this, but I want, again, I'm sorry, I want to have a little time to read and digest the planning board report.
Okay. We're backing up a lot of stuff and.
Well, I know, but
I know.
we just got it tonight.
I know. I'm just pointing it out.
No, these were being finished and copied late this afternoon, so
Yeah.
you're actually the first ones to see.
Okay. We're going to have to consider our schedule, and I'll do that with Kay and Sandy at some point fairly soon, because we're going to get stacked up behind, and we're going to get to a point where we got last year where I think we will have to defer later articles for a subsequent report so that we can go ahead and get our report out for the main parts that we have to deal with, which are usually during the first 20 articles, and it's anything 20 and beyond, you know, it's going to take until the second or third week. So we do have that option. So I guess that's kind of where we're heading. These, I just want to say, Wayland, thank you for coming. I just want to let you know that we are running substantially behind where we thought we are, and if that's a factor for you, I just wanted to let you know and see if you have, if that poses a problem.
I'm happy to defer because the group of 4 people from Cushman, like I think they and Wei Ling probably have topics that are more interest to the public.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question as a subsequent question about getting to the North Amherst first, but.
Are you asking me to come
No,
back next time, or
no, I just didn't
today?
know if you have a time constraint.
Because I have a cold, so I'm really very, very tired. I don't go to sleep, but I thought it's important for me to be here at 8:15. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I can. If it's gonna be very late, I'll make it hard for me.
We have seen the question that said we can just for process purposes. There's a parallel article that the town manager, and is that going to be discussed and presented next week?
Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, there is some basis for saying that maybe if you didn't, you're welcome to stay, and if you do, we would be delighted to hear from you, but it would be later. If you wait till next week, there's going to be several significant things on the agenda next week too, because this is an awfully complicated warrant this year, more so than most, and we're really getting stuck in that. But that would allow us to hear you at the same time we're hearing from the town manager about the parallel article.
I would prefer that we have heard from the town manager of his, I don't know whether he has an article put forth or not, but I think it makes more sense to hear about the town manager's warrant article, and then we will come to present our recommendation based on what we understand of this article.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, good. So I will be happy to come back next time.
Okay.
And then the next time is.
And check with Mr. Pulu then about the time estimate and see if we can do
I'll try to
better.
be a bit more accurate, but it will be a week from today, and I'll let you know about a time.
Thank you so much. I will go and go to bed. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
I'm sorry you're
Thank
not
you.
feeling well, but
Oh,
thank you
thank
for
you.
coming under those
Thank you so much.
circumstances.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. I think that the order we're going to finish, let's finish up with zoning and then we're going to go to North Amherst, the property that in the Cushman area. So is next. So let's complete the zoning.
Okay, Article 34 deals with the dimensional chart for the RF zone. RF zone is fraternity residence. This zone covers just a few properties in Amherst. There's some properties on Olympia Drive, and then there's some properties on North Pleasant Street, right on campus, the Newman Center, and two properties north of that. What we're suggesting is that those properties have the potential to be redeveloped by a private developer for student housing that is potentially more significant than what is there now. We're not aware of any proposals on the table, but if there's any chance, we don't want to miss an opportunity to not get the fullest development that we can get on those properties. And so what we're proposing is to add footnote A to a couple of the dimensions to allow, again, footnote A allows the permitting body to waive the dimensional requirements and that is allow potentially a larger structure than might otherwise be allowed. We recognize that the is different than the zone on Olympia Drive, and so rather than tailor the zone to fit one or the other, at the lower end, which would be Olympia Drive, but putting footnote A in to allow something to happen potentially more. What it does is add footnote A to 3 lines of the dimensional table for one zone.
The planning board will be holding a public hearing on this on the 17th. That's why you have a summary with maps rather than a report.
You'd think that the result would be making it more likely that there could be more significant residential development.
Making that possible.
Make that possible within these areas, whether it's student-oriented or family-oriented is unclear.
The district, the district is fairly limited in terms of the uses. It's the fraternity residence district that's created principally to house student housing of one form or another. It includes the category of social dormitory or similar use related to the educational institutions, which could be private student housing. Other nonprofit uses which are permitted anywhere in town are also permitted in that district.
And of course, if it's nonprofit use, then it's probably not going to have tax benefit if it turns out to be housing that would have a tax benefit. The reason I was asking the question is to who the likely tenants would be is that the communities had questions in the past about when you develop residential, what are the costs that are incurred to go with residential development. Questions from the committee? Hey, Lynn.
Well, taking all of this material together that you've given us, if this all went through, the potential is for a lot of housing. Am I correct in that assessment? I mean, we're talking about increasing in this area, increasing in the other areas. So I guess to me, the housing study, I guess, is going to come out, but at what point do we oversupply and we have vacancies? I'm beginning to be somewhat concerned about the numbers we're talking about.
I will tell you that I can't give you those numbers yet, but I'll try and get you the vacancy figures as it is now. But that the housing demand generated by the second largest employer in Western Massachusetts, which is the university, goes well beyond Amherst's boundaries. It's a balloon that fills the valley and in some cases spills over the hills on either side. So Amherst has a finite amount of land area on which building is possible. We preserved a lot of land wisely. We have village centers and neighborhoods that have a specific character that we don't want to override with just plopping down thousands and thousands of housing units, so that there's a carrying capacity for the amount of housing that Amherst could generate. And even if you did that in the next 10 years or so, what would happen is the balloon would shrink, but it would still be much bigger than Amherst. There are always going to be more people who want to live in Amherst of all kinds than there will be housing in Amherst to house them. So I don't think you need to worry about the vacancy rates. I think the vacancy rates, particularly in terms of university associated housing, and by that I mean not just students, but visiting professors, staff, and so forth, and people who work in Amherst and want to live here, who live in that balloon. Many of whom have nothing to do with the educational institutions. What this does is just looking at two discrete areas, a zoning district that is specifically designed for the purpose of creating student housing. It's a way of saying student housing here. The problem is that the dimensional requirements are roughly those of a sort of a residential neighborhood at the moment. The two areas in question are neither of them is in a traditional residential neighborhood. The Olympia Drive area is almost entirely owned by the university, except for the town's portion off the east end. That's going to become 40 or so affordable units in multi-unit housing. Immediately to the south, excuse me, is Village Park, which is a multi-unit residential area, and everything else is conservation land and open university property. In the campus, the Newman Center and the two fraternities immediately to the north are completely surrounded by the campus. So that is a setting, if housing went there, within which it would fit right in. In fact, that's why we included copies of the UMass master plan that show where their housing is intended, which is the yellow, second to the last map, is intended to go, and identifies the two areas in question. And
could you explain the map a little bit, just kind of run through it?
There are two maps here. There's also an excerpt from the land use section of the UMass master plan that talks about wanting to bring more housing into the core of the university so that it's easy to walk to everything and everything activates everything else. This is the first map, which has yellow, red, blue, and green, and pink and brown, I guess, areas. The yellow areas are intended to be future residential.
Future
residential.
So what's there now?
What's there now, for the most part, is what's there now is Commonwealth Avenue.
Well, right next to that it's already residential.
Yes, Clark Hill.
Yeah. So it's already residential.
Much of that is residential.
But to continue to be residential in the future.
Become more dense.
I don't know.
The last map shows, again, the three properties in the context of the red are the buildings that they, in very general terms, intend to create. And the red buildings along the spine of Commonwealth Avenue are all residential. So this fits within...
I'm sorry, these are existing buildings?
No, the brown ones are existing buildings, the red buildings are new, proposed future buildings.
This is the UMass master plan. This is their ideal future in 2050.
Right. So what we're saying is we have two small zoning districts that are intended for student housing. They already exist. And what we're trying to do is change some of the dimensional regulations in as modest a way as can be done to enable the possibility, not the surety, of private student housing development on those small areas.
So the difference would be if it was private student development, then it would be taxable because it's private, as opposed to if the university builds it.
Right.
Yes.
Not tonight because it's been a long evening, but at some point I think we need to talk about what is the capacity of Amherst in terms of water, sewer, public safety, health, schools, all of that. And from a planner, and not tonight, but from a planner's point of view, how long does it take in time to do all of this? And be able to keep up with sewer, water, schools, and all those things that go to make a nice town.
We can respond to that.
You don't have to tonight because it's
Not anytime soon. You're not going to override it anytime soon.
Yes, Janice.
Following up on what Mary Lou just said, when the superintendent of Public Works was here, wasn't he talking about water limitations?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
but we're not really close yet.
That
But
was
someday it
the
may
point.
have an impact.
Yeah,
Which is how that question.
we really need to move along, Vince, and I really don't want to allow public comment tonight, given how late it's going, because otherwise we're just not going to get through to where we else need to go. So I prefer not to do public comments if we can. I think it's an interesting question that you're raising about whether there's a limit. If there was a large enough development, yes, but it seems to be there anyway, and it's a question of where it's going to be and sound planning. To sort of where this might tie into talking about the Cushman proposed there too, but it's a tough one. I don't have a clear answer for you either, Marilyn. What's the committee's wish here? Yes.
I move we recommend this one.
And the reason you think?
It could increase, could create new growth on these properties. It could bring in new taxes. They don't seem to me to be very big financial downsides to the town of passing the law. I can't think of any.
the planning board has it.
Of course.
I haven't taken it.
I'm sorry. Can I withdraw my motion?
Okay.
Because I don't think we should, sorry. I said myself. We don't want to take a vote to a planning board unless hold its hearing and whether it's a public secret.
Okay. So then, it brings us to 36, which is a petition article.
Are we doing that?
Yeah, I think we've decided to, because we're waiting for the planning board article, there's nothing more unless somebody has additional questions now.
They held the hearing. This is their,
36.
not 36. Yeah.
Yes, no, we should go on to 36, that's what I was saying.
So 36 is a petition article to rezone the two lots on Main Street, north or west of Gray Street, from RG to BN. The impetus for this is that the current owner wants to sell those lots to Amherst Media. The planning board article, or the planning board recommendation while we support the project that is contemplated, our recommendation is on the merits of the rezoning itself, and that's that there exists BN zoning on the east side of Gray Street. Across the street, across the main street is BBC zoning. This is just logical completion of an existing mixed-use zone that previously was not contemplated because that was it was a vacant lot. The whole thing was vacant. It was not contemplated as part of the center. But now that the development has happened, that's a logical zone for that. BN is like BBC, but it's a little bit softer. It has more limitations on the hours of operation for buildings and some restrictions on the kinds of uses that are allowed. So it's a transition zone to residential neighborhood. It's the right zone for that area. So what this means is that we support rezoning of those two lots, regardless of whether it's Amherst Media that goes in there or some other operation. Or whether Amherst Media goes in and 20 years from now, somebody else takes over.
Just a question. I believe these two lots were also considered for purchase to create a greenway, if I'm not mistaken, as part of the continuous green swath from the Austin Dickinson and Emily Dickinson homesteads all the way through and in front of the Hills mansions. And so it's interesting the change. There wasn't, I don't recall the detail. I think they were going to try to use CPA funds to do it. I couldn't quite do it, or anyway. I'm curious about how that fits in to your conversation about this.
So the current zoning is RG, which means that the owner can build. There's two lots there. He can build two residences there.
Right.
The current zoning does not protect that as a greenway.
That's correct.
So given that, we think that allowing a different kind of building to take place there might actually improve the both the historical importance of the area and the view shed. So what's being contemplated is combining those two lots into one and building a larger structure than would be allowed on either one of those lots to happen to the east side of those lots. The change in zone mainly affects the lot size that's lot coverage that's allowed. Any use, the use that Amherst Media proposes is allowed either by SPR or SP depending on which kind of permit they go for. In RG, that the actual permitting doesn't change to BN. It would be the same, either SPR or SP. But the lot coverage would change. It would allow them to combine lots and build closer to the corner and thereby preserving more of the greenway. But again, it's not guaranteed.
Janice?
So if Amherst Media builds a building there, what is the taxability, whatever it is?
Same
for
taxability it has now.
Well, they're a nonprofit, they don't pay taxes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem that I have too. I think you're getting the same area. I don't know. I can't figure the financial consequence because while we try not to look at what might be built there, it's kind of hard to ignore it here.
I guess I would make one point, and again, always prefacing this with Amherst Media may not go here, even if the zoning changes. Something else might happen. But if it did, it is itself a destination. It is making alliances with the educational institutions. It would be, as a media and cultural center, it would be a complement to the existing mixed-use center that's there. It would help to enclose the street. It would activate and enliven the possibility of things happening across the street. There are all kinds of possible ancillary benefits that would have not so much a fiscal impact on that property, but on adjacent properties by making them more viable. As was said before, that's not a first level benefit. That's secondary, tertiary, but it's not there either.
Have a motion?
I have another question, actually. I'm sorry.
Hey, Doug.
So by having it be neighborhood business as opposed to what's across the street, which is BBC, right? Is the village center?
Right.
Then those things proposed in Article 31 about creating mixed-use buildings would not be applicable in that area. So is that considered not as appropriate a use in that space across the street? You know, in other words, talking about sort of creating a network with what's already in existence on the south side. I'm just curious. I mean, does the proposal within Article 31 impact this change?
It does not, because the neighborhood business district is probably the most recent business district in terms of its creation and adjustment, and a mixed-use building is already allowed by site plan review pretty much period, whatever the count or thresholds in this zoning district. So again, set Amherst Media aside in your minds. If the zoning changes, whatever's allowed in that zoning district might occur on those properties.
Right.
So, other questions, comments, motion? Yes.
Just a question. The fact that it is now a national or a historic district, it's in a historic district, that has no effect on the development. I assume we have to go through those additional
It would, yes.
permitting.
You have to go through the local historic district permitting as well.
But that's whether residences are built there under RG or commercial building under, yeah.
So, is there a strong feel? Anybody want to make a motion?
We're going to put it on the file.
So that there's a planning board that's already spoken here unanimously. So it kind of boils down to the possibility that either it may end up turning taxable property after all, or it may make neighboring properties more subject to development and
Or it may
more
no longer,
valuable.
it may no longer be taxable property, being a negative.
And we don't know. I move that we not take a position on this article.
Second.
Okay, so the motion is by Mary Lou to take no position, seconded by Anurag. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay. 6-0, one member absent. Okay. So thank you very much, and I think hopefully we can try and get through our questions with just posing additional questions to you and then reporting back in public meetings. So, thank you. So what we're going to do is take just a brief pause and invite our petitioners relating to the article on the village property, and I'll ready to speak with us. So, so that in the draft article or draft warrant that you have, I believe that this is Article 42. Yeah.
No, that's
No.
oh, yeah.
43. Yes, 3. So,
Jonathan?
good. If we may, let's move forward. So let me just do a quick introduction for the purposes, since you've got, it's been a while that some of you have been here, if you've been here at all. The purpose of the Finance Committee on articles that are not within the budget is, of course, to determine whether there's financial consequence, and if so, if we recommend it or not. However, in this one, it's actually a request for an appropriation, so that it's pretty much directly has a financial consequence because it is a request for an appropriation. So that said, I just wanted to put that forward and let you tell us a little bit of, I think that we have a pretty good idea, because we all read the newspaper, of what is proposed, but I think that what you could tell us about the article and what's behind the article and the possibility of putting together a proposal to fit with the article itself and how you see it's funded. All those are the kinds of things that would be particularly helpful.
I'm Jack Hirsch from Flat Hills Road. Appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you a little bit. I'm not sure how much we can answer your questions. This has all been a whirlwind for us. You know, we received notification of this project on February, I think 19th, 22nd, something around there. And since then, we have organized as quickly as possible. Needless to say, we feel that strongly that another student ghetto is not what the town needs or deserves. Certainly in our backyards, you know, we have this wonderful land that people use for passive recreation, and we've enjoyed for a long time. Many people in town come up and use it for passive recreation, very much like Amethyst Brook. It's actually connected to Amethyst Brook. It has the Robert Frost Trail going right through it. I don't know if you're familiar with the land, but it's right here on the map, and this is the Robert Frost Trail, and Amethyst Brook goes down here. Anyway.
In the context of the whole town, it's in this area.
And it's certainly, I mean, we feel that that the town would benefit in general if we can buy the conservation rights to this land and keep it as open space and keep it for passive recreation. Not to mention the wildlife that live there and the famous salamanders. We also don't want to burden the town with more budgetary problems. That's certainly not our intent, nor the intent of the article. In fact, what we're hoping is that we can do fundraising, find sources of money through grants and things like that. We actually are meeting with David Zelmick on Monday to talk about these things, so we're certainly working with the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board to do that. We just feel very strongly that building a student ghetto there is not the best use, and we'd much rather see the town benefit in the long term with buying the conservation lands. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just like to speak to the fact that short of the Holyoke Range, this is the largest piece of woodland that the town has, contiguous woodland, forested area. So, and the way the article is constructed, if we can't raise the money, it's all subject to being able to raise the money through grants and gifts and that kind of thing. So we're hoping that, you know, it does, if we can't do it, if we can't find the money, then it won't happen, essentially.
We also realize that to some extent this may be premature because it has been such a short period of time, and there are so many different towns and boards that are involved in this. So to some extent, we're alerting the boards that will be involved. I mean, it's going to involve the Historical Commission because the oldest building in North Amherst is right in this, right there. It's involved the zoning, the planning. There's so many pieces that come together, and partly what we're trying to do is just inform all of the boards which may or may not now be involved, but will be involved subsequently.
And in a way, we're here pretty early. I mean, it all happened, as we've said, just so fast, and we haven't even had a chance to explore how it can be financed. But we also think that if this land is developed in some other way, which in some respects it's we think it's pretty unbuildable, there'll be a lot of consequences, tax consequences, because the coverage, if it's residential and to the density that is proposed in this particular article, there'll be traffic issues, there'll be perhaps public safety issues. There will be public safety issues because depending on where something is placed on this land, the topography is such, there are many steep slopes and that kind of thing that I'm thinking of fire engine in particular.
And there will be added, this is designed to be student housing, the 140 some units, some of them being 4-bedroom.
170.
170, both 140.
Yeah.
We don't know where.
Yeah, but, and by the way, I'm eating the Mullen from Flat Hills Road.
And Barbara Ford from Flat Hills Road.
The possibility of just such a thing as added ambulance runs would be a financial burden on the town. The streets around are very narrow. There would be widening of streets. So there are lots of financial implications down the road that have not even been spelled out yet.
I love to point out the fact that Atkins Reservoir is about a mile away, and I'm sure in the summer there'll be lots of students that traipse up there and go skinny dipping. And it's doubtful that the Shutesbury police are going to do anything other than watch.
So maybe you have some questions about,
well,
or some guidance for us, perhaps, as to how to.
I mean, I'll tell you what's troubling me about it, and it's sort of on two sides. And one is I thought about whether I really should continue to chair for this section of the meeting, because I live in Cushman.
Yes.
And not only do I live in Cushman, but I've probably walked that trail through there several times a year for over 30 years. So you didn't need to describe it to me. Also recognize that it's been significantly logged lately, but of course trees grow back. Unless there's something that inhibits them from growing back. So I'm not unsympathetic. On the other hand, these are my concerns. Do we know the amount of the price that is being offered by the developer to the current owner, Coles, for the land?
There is no purchase and sale agreement at this point.
Right. We were told it was $6.6 million, but the town attorney invalidated the buy-sell agreement as not being sufficient to come out of Chapter 61. You know, if we look at similar land on Brushy Mountain in Shutesbury, the value is much, much less per acre. Yeah. And that's what we based this warrant article on. The Brushy Mountain land came out to something like $1,000 per acre, which at 154 acres would put this down at $154,000. So that's a good bit less than the 6.6 million. Even if it's more valuable because of where it is in Amherst, it might be $2,000 an acre. So we're talking about a much smaller figure than $6.6 million.
And we're talking about conservation restriction, essentially, which means that it couldn't be built on, but it could be perhaps utilized besides the passive and active recreation. There's a possibility that it could, as long as it remains as forest land, it will have to be managed, and the Conservation Commission might contract out to have it logged every so often. And there's some benefit from that as well.
Yeah.
They do that elsewhere.
Yeah, let me just say one thing, and then I'm going to ask Kay, so I don't hog it all myself, but if there was a willing buyer and a willing seller who put a price of 6.6 million, and I had heard a number over 6, but as being there, then you get in the question of what it would gain, what would be placed in value by a court in an eminent domain process. And what it's saying is that it's a vote to acquire land by eminent domain and other methodologies, so that if it's viewed as directing the town to make an eminent domain purchase and there's a risk that a court may determine the value closer to the 6.6 million because that is what the buyer and seller were willing to deal with, I'm not entirely convinced that it would be valued only at the conservation restriction value, that would seem to only fall back to that value if there was other reasons that the construction was denied.
One of the problems is there's so many. We heard a figure that was much higher than 6 million at one point. The Landmark Group has had their people up doing ecological, topographical studies, and the land is such that it may not be, the buyer may not agree to that price because of what he would have to put into the development of the area. Unfortunately, we just don't know at this point so much.
And we had, the timing was such that we decided to go ahead with this petition, even though, in order to get it on the warrant, because we didn't know what might happen in the interim.
And I think that what we've intended to do is to offer all options for trying to acquire the land, eminent domain just being one of the options. We also talked about receipt of grants and gifts and bequests. And sometimes eminent domain works for a seller rather than just the municipality. It may be a way that the seller and the town can agree on a higher price than just the conservation land, but something that still could be afforded. So it could work both ways, and the intent of the article is just to provide all options.
Yeah, I'll just make one other observation and then ask Kay, and that is that you put a 70% figure in, well, 30% of 1.2 million is $360,000. So there is a piece. Kay, I'm sorry I did that.
That's just what I was going to say. I mean, it's asking town meeting to appropriate $360,000 in May. And as a member of the Finance Committee, I'm really not ready to recommend that now. Where budgeting is, the whole process of developing budgets and capital budgets, we are well aware how tight our financial straits are. And this project, this proposal for spending is large in the context of almost any capital spending we're doing. It's quite large.
One thing we haven't mentioned, that we also went to the CPA committee. We were too late, this came up too late, and the CPA committee was very receptive about and suggesting that we submit this next year for CPA funding, that because it is both historical and conservation, it fits under the CPA rubric.
It's also a very large amount for them.
Yes, it is.
Right. And it's also coming up out of the blue in a sense. And this was a 7-year action plan, conservation recreation, and they did have it on their plan, but I think because it is in private hands at the moment, and under Chapter 61, I don't think it became a high priority. But it's possible. I mean, I think for the town as a whole, it's something that should be preserved, and it may move up. That's all.
Okay.
That's another thing. Before I want to even look on it favorably, I'd like to hear why it didn't rise to the high priority for the Conservation Commission in developing their plan. We know that the Conservation Director has been very active in trying quietly to acquire conservation restrictions or conservation land, and this has apparently not been on his radar at this point. So I'd just like to hear more about how it fits in with the overall plan. I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but Town of Amherst has a lot of conservation land and land restricted under agricultural preservation restrictions. And so I just want a good, strong case made for the town acquiring this land as well as other land, and not a good, strong reason being just that we want to stop a commercial student housing project. To me, that's not a sufficient financial reason for this committee to support it.
We will know more answer to that, and it's a very important question after 11 o'clock Monday when we're meeting with David on this.
Yeah, I was going to press on that, but just so you're aware, and you probably are aware, the way these things usually come up is that they get developed to a large extent by town staff and then presented either through the Community Preservation Act Committee or the Joint Capital Planning Committee, depending upon if it's town or Community Preservation Act funds that are going to be used. And normally the town would have worked something out with the seller and had some understanding about willingness to enter into the agreement and the price to be paid in the agreement. We've had several of these in the last year. For something of the $360,000 range, we would have also looked into the question as to whether it, and this goes whether it was done with Community Preservation Act funds or town funds, as to whether to bond the amount as opposed to taking it as a cash purchase, because interest rates have been low and continue to be low, and you stretch over the purchase over a period of time. And so by this coming up, and I'm not saying, I understand absolutely what happened. You got thrown with this information in February and didn't have much time.
Right.
But this is coming up as a type of proposal that would normally be developed under a very different process.
Yes, and we certainly are aware of that, and it was just something that we feel that we should at least bring forward and let it be given to consideration, and perhaps if something doesn't work out, it's going to come to floating to the top at this point, and it's a potential possible to lose this land as an open space, or whatever you want to call it, and maybe it will rise higher on the priority list and be approached in the regular way that we usually do that. And I certainly think the Kay is legitimate in thinking that, she can't. It's difficult for the town to say, you want to go ahead with this at this point. But we're here. The warrant it's going to be on the warrant unless we do something else. So we're letting you know.
No, we appreciate that. Are there other questions from the rest of the committee? Janice, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, this might be a question for Sandy regarding Chapter 61. So over the years, the owner of this property has had tax benefits, I guess, because it's in Chapter 61. Is that true? Or and then what happens if they sell it to a private owner?
I have to say, I'm not the best person to ask about Chapter 61. I don't know much about it. Maybe other people do, or I could get you the answer.
It's my understanding that I think you have to pay 5 years of back taxes.
That's
But that's nothing compared to the sales price, obviously. And I'm not sure, you know, it would be back taxes as
As if it were.
value today, you know, whatever.
As if it were.
What the forgiveness has been. Because they get, I'm not sure if it's 1/3 or something reduction. I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to that, but.
Sounds like at this point we don't even know whether there's actually been a sale
That's right.
agreement consummated.
There has not.
There has not been.
Interog.
Well, I just have a clarifying question. I don't really fully understand. I think I'm following the discussion a little bit. But, so there's a private party who wants to purchase the land. And in response to that, this proposal is being developed that the town purchase this for conservation purposes.
That's what.
Is that right?
That's what we're at.
Right.
So,
Although it's been on the town's plan for some time, they just.
sure, until I followed the discussion. But the private party sale and purchase agreement is not there, it's not valid. So we don't know, that, so there may actually not be any private
That's correct.
offer.
It's true.
I mean, it'll all be a mirage, there's nothing out there. So if that is not, so does the motivation to then purchase this for conservation go away?
No.
So
We
you
think
want.
it's a value for the, we think it's a pretty high.
Okay,
value. Yeah,
so even though it was triggered by the rumors of a purchase price, now whether or not the purchase offer exists, this becomes a proposal. No matter what.
Yeah.
So you just
Yeah.
The figures get much smaller.
The figures get, but we don't. What happens if? So this is what I'm trying to understand. Maybe somebody can explain this to me. What happens if the private offer does really come back as a valid offer? So does the town get in a competition with the private party to purchase this? So do we have a bidding war? What happens then?
It's not
We're
certain.
pacifists, we don't engage in bidding wars.
Okay, let's.
So I
we will not call it war, but
I think that, I don't know if the seller might not be willing, and so we may, I guess, would not be able to negotiate something with them.
So if the seller
The current,
The town will get a right of first refusal because it's been in Chapter 61. And if they enter a valid buy-sell agreement, that will set the value of the land. So the town would then have the right to either consider buying the land at that value or refuse to do so, and then it would go through.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand that. So if the private offer of $6.6 million comes back as a valid offer, town still has the right of first refusal, but the right of first refusal is for $6.6 million.
yes,
Yes.
or whatever.
Or whatever the number might be.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand that, that's all.
Yeah. In an eminent domain proceeding, it may or may not get that amount, but it's pretty light. That would be an indicia for the court of the value of the land.
The value of the land will be a function of what the valid offer on the table is.
That's correct,
Probably.
that's why they need a valid offer, and that's why it was refused by the town council, because there were conditions and put on by the potential buyer.
Sure.
So he ruled that it was really an option to buy.
Okay,
Which
so
doesn't fit into
as a strategy, it might be, so what I'm understanding is, so while that offer is off the table, maybe the town can actually use this as an opportunity to actually go and purchase the land.
Purchase the land or a conservation restriction on.
Or put it on, so that then if the offer comes after that, there is no way the offer can actually be a better offer. Okay. I understand that now. Okay, I understand the reason why you're proposing this.
I guess
Yeah,
I'm not sure
okay.
if that's not-
Just one question, in reading it, it looked, as I understood it, and I could very well be wrong, it looks to me like you're seeking money to buy a conservation restriction,
Right.
not the land itself.
That's right.
That's right, that's right.
So, in that case, if you have, if the land were to be managed and logged, wouldn't the owner get the benefit of that, not the town?
No, I'm not sure about that.
Because it's not the town's property.
But you seem to, Sandy.
That makes sense to me, but I don't know this area of the law.
I think that is correct.
And I think in the Brushy Mountain sale, what Cole sold was development rights, not
Yes,
conservation.
that's right.
No, conservation rights.
I think it was development.
Pretty sure it was conservation rights for 8.3 million.
That'd be worth checking into it. I don't, because you and I have different understandings of that, and I'm not going to swear that I'm right on this. But
No, I think it's something we just don't, we don't know.
my understanding is that there's actually, turns out that there was a little glitch in there that nobody knew about, which is that somehow they withheld a little piece of that for themselves on the top of Brushy Mountain, which they're now is a home site for apparently a member of the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
A very big yard.
Yes.
You know, so if the conservation restriction means that the owner will continue to own the property and they can continue logging the property, but there will be no building cannot be built upon. Is that
No, higher, yeah, development, yeah.
there can be no
Depends
development?
on the terms of the restriction that's placed on it. But I think that was the distinction that we were talking about that we really don't know the answer to, is what is the nature of the restriction in the Leverett property, whether it was just development rights and they still had the rights to log in it, which is what I was getting at while I was raising the question. Because I think that Coles retained the right to log into that property.
So, but if it's had a conservation restriction, the town stops getting any property taxes on that.
No, they would get property. I don't think there's a lot of property tax value in it right now anyway, but to the extent that it's land that they can get something from in the nature of the lumber, that it would have a minimal value for taxation. Possibly, that would be something to ask the assessor.
Right. There's a tax rate for the land. With it being permanently non-developable, it's always going to be lower than if you were thinking about developable land.
So it'll be lower than what it is right now.
No, I would say it's the same as it is right now.
Okay.
No, it's because it's going to be used. If the restriction is placed on it, it's going to be used for the same purpose it is used for right now. If it's sold to a developer, then it gets developed, then it has a much higher property tax value because there's real estate on it. I mean, there's houses and the value is much different then. But its value now and the value with the restriction on it is probably about the same because theoretically the activities that would take place on it are about the same.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
If that area were to be developed, does it have water and sewer?
No.
But the developer would actually then have to.
Yeah, they'd have to put
They'd
it,
have to put it.
Well,
depending on how what
this
kind of
is-
a permit they want.
yeah, I have to be. I think this is a tough one. For all of us live in this town, and all of us want this town to be a good quality of life for all our neighbors. And so there's that sentiment.
Yes.
And the other sentiment in the finance committee is that this town needs property for the tax base to help us with our budget situation, which is always in tight. And so I find myself torn in these kinds of things because I want the town to be, not hurt anybody's quality of life, at the same time have a way for the town to continue to grow its property base, so that we as townspeople get a little bit help on the taxes side of it.
We should add that I don't think that this group is strictly, because we are abutters, but that there is the issue of whether this is an appropriate site for student housing. this far from the university, and there will be a cost to the town with roads that have, you know the roads down there, the roads that will have to be widened, policing have to be done, so that even if the property does go on the tax rolls, I have no way of estimating what the cost to the town will be, but there will be a cost to the town in having student housing that far from the university. It's 5 miles to get the traffic alone, that sort of thing.
And it's 2 miles from the last outside party that was at, what, Townhouse?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And it's
I'm
farther
sure
away.
sure students will be walking over to play in the woods rather than.
Well,
And the noise issues and so on, so you make a little money from the noise violations, but.
yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
I don't know.
So that would be a pretty substantial
collected,
money.
Have we ever collected for those things? I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you know, it's a difficult, it's a very difficult conversation, you know, and
Right.
so, you know, but
Right.
I think everybody has to try to understand everybody's points of view, you know, so it's just a difficult conversation.
And we certainly, we're well aware of the financial situation of the community, of the town. So,
Yeah.
we're, you know,
Yeah.
Especially because the price hasn't been set with this, you know. If the seller loses interest or decides it's not buildable,
Sure.
it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, then the Conservation Commission would have time to enter into consideration as to where it stands in priorities, and the town would have an opportunity to look for grants, and the Community Preservation Act Committee would have time to consider whether it's something that they would consider recommending,
right.
recognizing that they have to take it on. So it's sort of like, if the sale doesn't go through, we've been given at least a short-term gift.
Yeah.
Plus the seller might think about getting something out of it rather than nothing, who knows, you know.
But we have a chance to work through another process.
Do you think the warrant is premature and we should withdraw it, or, I mean, do you have a recommendation?
I can't advise you on that, and because I think that there are various reasons that people bring things forward on the warrant. I think that you've raised the questions to an educational value of bringing it forward, and those are things that are strategic questions I wouldn't think to advise on. You know, I think that it puts the Finance Committee in a funny position, because it was just why I was trying to decide what I wanted to do about it personally. I think in the end I have to do what I think is financially sound for the town. Is my responsibility in the end. The other thing that I just would alert the committee to is that I believe that Mr. Zomack will be appearing before us very soon regarding Article 29, which is a rental housing proposed bylaw, and so that if the committee wished to thinks or questions to ask Mr. Zomack before it takes a position on it, it could, or you could decide that under the circumstances it's just something you feel you need to take a position on now. I don't have an opinion, I just put that out. Okay.
Are you talking about the registration law? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the rental property.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So we have to meet with him.
Could I ask Mr. Hurt to spell your last name for the minutes?
HIRSCH.
Your last name is
Mulholland, M.A.C.
M.A.C., that's right, thank you.
We have not yet, we also are scheduled to talk to the Conservation Commission, but that has not yet taken place either. So.
Yeah.
In that regard, I think we should wait. I mean, I know it stacks things up further, but I don't still think we have enough information right now. I mean, I would like to hear from Mr. Zomack. I'd like to hear if the Conservation Commission has a position or idea about this. Kate's point earlier about where it fits into their overall planning. And,
yeah. By the way, that is actually something to consider. What Doug just triggered me to think about. You were asking about strategies, and another strategy in the end might be a motion to refer to the Conservation Commission, it might be better for us to wait a little bit of time before taking a position on this, because if it's on a motion to refer, we might have a different statement regarding a motion to refer than a motion on the main under the article itself. I don't know that, but it would be another reason for us to not take action tonight.
And that's fine with us, because we didn't even have time to really, completely do some of the research, so. And you scheduled, this was the time you could have us come, so there we are.
No, and we appreciate your being here, and I actually think it was a very good discussion, and I think I learned a lot, and it was very helpful.
I think it's a good solution.
It might be good to do a little bit of research about what happened up in Lovegrove, not because we were bound by what happened up in Lovegrove, but it would just be good to know. Yeah.
My question, have we ever supported eminent domain as a finance committee?
Not these individual people.
What?
Not recently.
Not these people on.
I've not done it. It's not come up.
The police station and Cherry Hill. One was friendly and the other was not. Well, actually, they were both friendly. So
Quite a while ago.
So sometimes you do things, you put things in by eminent domain, but it's a matter of, I'm not sure that we've ever done it when the town board and town staff have not come to us with a proposal along the lines that we previously described.
This was done a long time ago, with the school land, where the junior high and not the junior high, but whatever it's called today.
Middle school.
And the
Middle school?
and the other school, the elementary school, actually.
Wildwood.
Because the same company owned that land too, and that time I think it was unfriendly, but and then the town didn't do it hasn't done it forever, because people don't like using it.
Yeah, and that situation, of course, was so long ago, since probably in the late 60s, early, that happened, and I gather that was one of these that was worked out with town staff. The town manager at the time was very much involved in negotiations of that and the decision to place it on a town meeting warrant to take it by eminent domain. It's so long ago and under such different circumstances.
Right. Well, I mean, this really was, I guess, to give also, in case it would help with the negotiations, if the seller wanted to, make sure that they got the highest and best price, I guess. So, but it does increase the financial aspect of, the obligation.
Yeah.
And one other thing, we talked about bonding, and that's another reason, for the CPA monies, they're going to go out for bonding. If this by any chance gets passed, the cost of going out for bonding is far better to aggregate, as you know anyway, on Sandy knows, sure, to aggregate purchases, and so you don't have to pay extra fees to go out and purchase a single thing or something, bond for a single thing. So that might be a useful, something to think about.
Of course, when you borrow money, you're still spending it.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you could, if you do it all at once.
Yes. We're planning to recommend something like that to town meeting for capital purchases.
Right, and you do it all at once, then you only get to pay the fee to put it together. What?
You just have to pay the fee once.
Yes, that's what I'm. So that's the mechanism, right? It's not, but it saves some money.
And the Community Preservation Act Committee is used to putting together bonding proposals, as it did for Plum Brook and other things, as I think in a fairly recent one.
Could I ask a question? Can you aggregate different purposes under one bonding issue? I mean, this is say conservation and just for example, school or something like that, or do you have to do them separately?
When we sell a bond, we sell it for multiple purposes at a time.
Okay, so you can do that. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Hawthorne thing was spotted, and that had 3 purposes.
But the town, as long as it's a town purchase, it can be combined. Obviously, it couldn't be combined if the regional schools was doing the purchase, because regional schools is a different entity.
But I'm not saying it would be schools, I just say as an example.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
So, anything else that the committee has to ask tonight? So I think what we'll do is when give it a little bit of time too, and when David Zomek comes and meets with the committee, we will take it up at that time. Do we know the date on which that's going to be yet, or is that not?
I think he's coming in on the 11th.
So we may or may not have may not have enough information for us at that point.
But we will have already met with him, so that
if we find out any other information that might be useful to you, could we communicate that to you?
Yes.
Okay.
You can either communicate it to Sandy, you can send it to me. I would say send it to the Finance Committee address, except for the fact I'm still not convinced that it's working.
Oh, all right.
Okay, anything else from the committee? Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as a neighbor, I appreciate the vigilance about this. I do think that it's something. I think you've stated all of the concerns very well.
Thanks.
And we understand your position.
Thank you.
From the town's perspective.
So, hi Vince, thank you very much for your patience. And there were 2 petition articles, and
I don't have a copy of them because I didn't get a copy when I turned them in. So
right there is the warrant for the articles that we are considering tonight. And so when you get to, turn to Article 40 on page 18 and 41 is on page 19. That's not the final placement because this is not a signed warrant. This is from a draft. But it gives you the wording if you need to refer to the wording during the presentation. And you've been here often enough, you know the standard pitch that we're looking at financial consequence. So
if I can be briefly address both issues, like one at a time.
Yes, please.
And I'll address the 41st. This is the rental housing information that this came about because there was no provision in the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods proposal to inform tenants of the it was all interaction between the town and landlords and so forth. And it seemed to me that, especially with regard to the habitability of properties, and when the Amherst Tenants Association was more active, I was actively involved in not only monitoring the inspectors that came to people's apartments and enforce the sanitary code, but we also at the state level regarding the sanitary code. So I believe that the best vehicle for enforcement to educate their rights and responsibilities is to communicate directly with them, not to rely on landlords or try to push, in some cases, a wet spaghetti noodle, hoping that it will go in the direction that you want it to go. But communicate directly with tenants. And what I've done is modified. There used to be a requirement that we mail out the booklet that was maybe 50 or 60 pages, maybe more. The rights and responsibilities as a landlord and tenant in the town of Amherst. And it just became difficult. The process of mailing out such a large document became difficult. And so what I've recommended is that each year the town, by August 1st, update that document and have it available online in a way that when you go to the town's website, you can easily find rental housing rules and regulations. And then the second thing, that the town send out a mailing to each rental household within the town, a notice of what the relevant, the bylaws that we think are important for people to know about, how, in terms of enforcement and the state sanitary code, who to call, when to, what agency of town government to call about various things, and don't inform people that you're not supposed to park in the lawn. This is what the rules regarding the alcohol-related disturbances and so forth. These are the consequences. And my sense is that there's just dozens of people in the employ of the town, because all these documents now exist. We're capable of writing a brief summary. Whether that's, I would say that the summary would either be a page and a half, where you fold over and have one half of one side be the address and return address in the town's bulk mailing stamp, or you do 3.5 pages, which is an 11 by 17 folded twice. And I just leave that up to the town. However they want to communicate the basic information, I would say do it. And the postage for bulk rate for either of those would be, I would say, somewhere around 25-30 cents, and probably about the same amount of money to print. Less, of course, if you did the smaller version. And I would think, with 5,000 rental households in the town of Amherst, or slightly larger number, that isn't 50 cents. It's about 50 cents per household, and you have a system of automated. Once you get all the addresses, you can just put them on by an automated means, so you don't end up having the town staff do a whole bunch of stuff, which is what they used to do, mailing out the booklet. I think it has the financial consequences are not the issue with regard to this item, and it's probably between $2,500 and $3,000, and you're hitting the tenants twice. You're putting something on the website electronically. You're sending them something in the mail, and then hopefully on Part C, the town is successful in persuading the university to communicate with the students who rent within the town of Amherst, and they receive an electronic communication from the university that is essentially a duplicate of what they receive in the mail. Because, as anyone who's tried to do informational stuff, the more times that information, they get hit with the same information, the better it sticks. And
my concern would be that it would be considered a junk mail. They won't even open it.
Well, I would say that it may be true of some of the households, but enough households will open it. And for example, if you want to communicate information, you don't have to have 100% of the people who the information is intended for that actually gets to them. What ends up happening is that the people who are more astute, more involved, who read their mail and so forth. Select the stuff, and then when they have friends who have problems of one sort or another, they can say, hey, you know, you got this mailing and this is what you do. So I would say if we could get maybe 25% of the households to actually take it in, and then you'd get another percentage from the email from the university, that would probably be sufficient, you know, if you did it every year. Because, you know, maybe a 19-year-old student who's, you know, a sophomore who's first year off campus doesn't pay attention. By the time they get to be seniors, they might pay attention.
Yeah, it's probably
so the thing is repeating, providing the same information, doing it every year, repeating it. I tell people it's like basic training in the military. You got to do it for every group of people that comes in. You can't do it for one group and then let all the rest of them just sort of do what they want. So it would be an annual thing, but I think it's manageable in terms of the cost and the complexity of what's being done once the summary is provided and once and I think the handbook has been digitized a long time ago and is electronically available. Once that information becomes widespread electronically, I think that keeping it up to date and so forth would be an inconsequential expense for them and a problem for the town.
I just want to point out real quickly, and then call Mary Lou, that if you look on page 7 of the compendium that Sandy gave you, you see, for the purposes of next week's discussion, the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods proposal from the town, and on that page, section 8 is the tenant information section that is built into the proposal that we presume will be made by the select board. Of course, Mr. O'Connor previously stated that he feels that it is not sufficient, and he gave reasons why, but I wanted to point out that you have it in your hands as to what the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods are. Mary Lou.
Yes,
There is a new one.
8 on page 7.
Page 7 of that compendium that I gave you.
I think that the section A about being on the town website, and also C where the university would have emails of the students makes sense, but having done mailings for political groups and so forth, B, I think, is costly, time-consuming, and I agree that probably, a 75% not paying attention is not worth all the cost and effort put into it by town hall. So I like 8. It does require that the landlord have those booklets, and that I would assume when they sign the lease that they're given one of those booklets, and that would be a less expensive way to deal with it, but it would get it in their hands.
Actually, I would say that would provide another way of getting the information to the tenants. But I personally believe, one, requiring that the landlords provide proof of delivery, I think is just, really, I don't want my money spent having my landlord tell you that he gave me something. One, because, the regulations, I was a new tenant 14 years ago where I am, so the regulations have changed considerably since then, and so it doesn't really, I think it's important to get it in the hands of people. And the expense, as I said, is between $2,500 and $3,000. It's the expense is inconsequential, and if we only hit 20 to 25% of the households, it is well worth the efforts, because over time we will get to everybody one way or the other. And multiple communications are the key. You know, don't just rely on one thing. So I mean, if it were $25,000 to $30,000, I might agree with you. But when it's $2,500 to $3,000, I think that is an amount of money the town should communicate directly to. And I'm not, given the complexity of the town's proposal, I'm not sure that it is going to pass, that Section 8 will be enacted. So I think it's good that if the warrant is the way it is, I'm happy to be number 40 on this issue and have them be wherever they are, Article 29, because I'm not, I certainly as a tenant can't vote for it, and I don't think I think it's way too complicated and expensive. But anyway, that's my response. And do you want me to go on to the next one, or do you want to take some position before I go on to 41?
Usually we do it one at a time unless you're so closely intertwined. And I'd also leave it to the committees. If the committee makes a motion, I will of course accept the motion. If the committee doesn't make a motion because it's recognizing that Mr. Zomek's expected to present what's current tentatively Article 29. This is not definite article numbers. Next week, he wants to consider it all together. That's the committee's prerogative. So, but I'll entertain a motion from any member of the committee, of course. Okay?
Well, I will jump out there and move to not recommend this article.
Is there a second? Wait, the motion's been made, so I need to ask if there's a second. Okay, go ahead. You can remake the motion later.
I support A, and I would like us to do that because, and I guess it is on the website, but I'd like to make sure that it is. And then I would go along with 8. So I don't want to throw the whole article out, but I certainly think A is worthwhile.
Do we need to have a town bylaw requiring something
is that what it
appear on
says?
the town website?
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is a bylaw.
This is a bylaw amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Article 29 is a bylaw too.
Correct.
So, no.
Yes, Janice.
I guess I would like to sort of talk about this with Mr. Zomek when he's here and sort of combine it with Section 8 and see his take on it. How he feels about the communication.
So at this point, there's no motion on the floor because there's no second to the motion made, and there's been a suggestion that we take it up after we hear from Mr. Zomek about the other article that we expect the select board to offer. So, hearing no something further, then I would say go ahead to 41.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is also a response to the town proposal, and based on what I heard and so forth at the committee meetings that I attended, and basically it takes some of the provisions of the town proposal, but does not require that a parking plan be executed by each landlord for every property and so forth, but just sets the rules forth, and it's the first paragraph applies to everybody. I don't believe we should be, especially since we are experiencing rental properties in almost every neighborhood in town, cul-de-sacs, main streets, and so forth, that we should be passing a bylaw that pertains to only one type of occupancy. When the family moves into a neighborhood and they're governed by the town's provision, but the other families on the street aren't. That's bad policy. So I've made this apply to everybody. And I simply took off from the town's proposal. Eliminating the requirement that they provide a parking plan. I don't want to pay rent to hire somebody to look over the parking plans for 5,000 rental units. All I want to do is have people not park in the lawns and not park in inappropriate spaces that create conflict and disturbance in neighborhoods. And, I want to have their way to be, people have weddings, funerals, and so forth, that they can get permission to do what's forbidden, and in general. And so it's simple, straightforward, applies to everybody. Same rules for for homeowners and tenants, and just avoids the complications that I think are going to cause the town's proposal to sink beneath the waves, just from the weight of it all and the expense of it all. So, and I do want to have something in the bylaw that prohibits parking on the lawn. And I don't care whether there's 8 students in a house or 4. And I don't think my neighbors do. I think all I want them to do is not park on the lawn and don't have parties till 2 or 3 in the morning. Respect their neighbors and the fact that people have to go to work in the morning, even though it's Thursday night. Or whatever. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't think there is anything in terms of enforcement. All those general bylaws are enforced by complaint. So if the rental household that's parking on the lawn is a group of UMass women students, some of whom babysit for the kids in the neighborhood, then I suspect we won't get complaints about that household. And so it's just, I don't think there's any consequential expenses to the town that wouldn't occur from what we have now. And, I think it's it gets at the problem, which is people do not want to have a house next door to them having, cars parked all over everywhere.
Yeah, Chance.
These being bylaws, revisions or whatever, amendments, have they gone through legal for the wording and all?
I haven't heard from the town council, but I must say that I've taken a lot of the language from the part of the town's proposal that I feel would serve the interests of the town and of tenants, and left out those things related to drawing up plans and other things that I think are not in either my interest as a tenant or in the town's interest in terms of where we direct our tax money. I just don't want to have somebody sitting in this town hall reviewing every, the parking plans for 5,000 rental units.
Well, except for the fact that I just want to point out, you're referring, of course, to section 10 of the article that appears on page, section 10 starts on page 7 of the same article that we were previously discussing that we expect to be offered by the select board.
Right.
we're not here to discuss that article, so that to the extent that you're making arguments against an article that's not on the table, I just wanted to point out that that's not effective use of our time at 5 minutes of 10 when we have other business to handle. But, you know, the question is you know, assuming that it went through, you know, the town council had no negative comments, two things would possibly be there, and we'd have to ask for some help on that from council. One is that if the prior article has passed, this would extend some of the parking restrictions to additional properties that are not covered by what's now Article 29. And if Article 29 doesn't pass, then it's an independent article. So I think those are two just obvious points that everybody understands.
Well, I want us to pass something. But one of my difficulties is you know, we could end up without a bylaw that says you can't park on the lawns, and without something that provides a penalty and a process to go along with that requirement. And I want to make sure that at the end of the day, we have something, you know, in writing that can be enforced and that can be summarized for tenants in their new leases and on the town's website and maybe in a mailing or whatever, so that we, you know, we get closer to being able to live together in peace. You know?
And
yes.
I'm not sure I heard you correctly, but let's say I have a party and I invite 20 people and for that day, and I allow them to park on the lawn and the driveway. I would just pay, but the lawn. Are you saying that I have to have a written request to the code enforcement official to have this party?
Well,
or to have them park on the lawn?
The only thing I would say is usually what people have said in the past, that if you tell your neighbors you're going to have a party and that some of the attendees, because there's not enough space in the street and so forth, are going to park on your lawn, and you have a problem with that, if you tell your neighbors that, you're not going to get any complaints, so you might not even feel like you want to go to the code enforcement officer for a written permission that you'll probably have to give to the neighbors anyway. But if you're going to have something pretty large,
2,000.
Yeah, right, 2,000. Well, hopefully not 2,000. But you know, if you're going to have something pretty large that's going to have a pretty substantial impact, then I think it's probably a good idea to go to the code enforcement people, simply because they can then make suggestions as to, you know, to make sure that people don't park on both sides of the street and narrow the street to a dangerous degree, that they would require that you notify the neighbors and things like that. It's just, you know, to some extent, when you're having a really substantial event, it's like getting somebody who's got a little expertise to make sure that, you know, you don't cause a public safety problem, or, you know, and they don't want to get complaints. They don't want to, on Saturday, come to your wedding or, you know, your, you know, family member's wedding and have to ask, you know, everybody to park, you know, move their cars from the left-hand side of the street to the right-hand side of the street. They'd rather deal with it ahead of time so they can have the weekend off.
Thank you.
Okay. Janice.
I guess I would say I don't see really the financial implications of this. I don't disagree with, of course, you know, parking all over. I don't think they should park all over the lawns and stuff. But I don't really see the financial implications. But then again, I think we should take it up with 29, because it's sort of related. Part of it is.
Yeah, I tend to generally agree with you that the only thing I would want to do before I went there is ask the question as previously requested as to whether town council has seen any problem either with it as written or if 29 passed, whether it created confusion and conflict with 29. It would be helpful to have an answer to that, but otherwise, in principle, standing on its own, it does provide some potential revenue from fines and enforcement. The cost is probably pretty minimal and really falls on policing time, which is counterbalanced, and therefore I'm not sure that I either see a financial consequence unless there's something that I missed on the legal piece.
There are fines in the proposal, $100, I think.
Yeah. And can I ask if in fact I assume that if we've gotten to this point on the warrant that the town council has reviewed the articles that have been proposed, both the petition articles and the town's articles. If he hasn't, and if an issue comes up, I would just ask that somebody provide me with a copy of whatever the town council might have, say in writing, so that I can be aware of it beforehand.
I'm not aware that he has,
Okay.
but I have a note to myself to ask.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you need from me?
I don't think so. This has been helpful. I'm sorry it got as late as it did, and I appreciate your patience and your allowing the large number of people from Cushman to go first, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I was on a building committee for the Cushman area for the Housing Authority. I got to know Michael. I knocked on those doors 8 or 10 times, not the people on Five Hills Road who were here tonight, but the folks who will be, I think, most substantially impacted. And so the only time I've been through those woods is when Barbara Ford and her husband were on sabbatical in 1977, and the tenants who lived in that household ran for town meeting from their house. And so we had a meeting there, and I walked through the woods from Henry Street to their house. And that's in fact, that was the only time until recently that I've been to their house.
For people watching on Amherst Media, it's part of it's part of the Robert Frost Trail. You enter it from Market Hill Road, fairly close to the Cushman area on the right side, and it's a well-marked trail. It used to be a lot prettier than it is now because there's been substantial logging in there, but it's a nice trail that goes up to the Atkins Reservoir after crossing Flat Hills Road. So it is a very nice trail. But thank you. We need to get on then.
I hope if you take up their article that you might have a site visit to, because it is a very beautiful area. It is not really the place for UMass storage. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sandy was going to do two things, I think, quickly, or as quickly as we can, but one is that any comments that you have about what the governor, what the legislature proposed in transportation funding and the governor's response and how that might affect us if we know anything. And then second of all, I asked him to provide us with what would be the motions next week.
Okay. Just so a quick recap of what a lot of you have probably seen in the paper already. The legislature announced that it wanted to have some sort of plan for funding transportation. The governor had originally proposed a $1.9 billion plan for transportation and education. The legislature came back with a $500 million plan, about a quarter of what the governor proposed. It would have an impact on how much money we get from Chapter 90 for our road money. and it would also provide some more money to the PVTA and start forward funding the PVTA, which would save them some money and might ultimately save the town a little bit of money in terms of our assessments. But it does not provide the big boost in revenue that is an important part of the governor's plan for extending transportation. It's not really clear what's going to happen with his proposals for more education funding or for more local aid to us. So it's all very much up in the air at this point. We'll at this point wait to see what the legislature comes out with when the House comes out with its budget next week. In the meantime, today, the governor announced that he would veto this $500 million plan. So we have an interesting situation on Beacon Hill. A lot of uncertainty at this point. So I think at this point, what we can do is wait till next week to see what happens with the legislature. As we talked about last time, if there is no additional, if the governor's additional local aid doesn't come through, we have about a $60,000 deficit that we need to clear up. We won't really know what that effect of all that will be until we see those numbers next week. So I'm not here to propose a particular solution tonight, just to keep you in mind that that uncertainty exists and we're going to have to deal with it. Anything else?
I don't think I turn it to others, because you and I have talked about it today, so I don't want to.
Right. That's where we're at. In the meantime, I'm just going to hand out for your records, and these are the dollar amounts. This is a list of the warrant articles with the dollar amounts.
Is this the order?
It's in the order as it exists now. The
Okay.
Select Board, this is as of 5 o'clock tonight, this is the order.
Okay.
Select Board will vote on the warrant on Monday. They signed the warrant on Monday. So there still could be some changes in between now and then. But to the best of our knowledge, this is where things are. And so just going down the list, we have some FY13 budget amendments. There will be a transfer right now between out of debt, because we saved money when we did the refinancing, so we have more money appropriated for debt this year than we need, because we did some refinancing bonds this last time. And we know we're going to have a shortage in veterans services, so we're going to recommend transferring money out of that debt line into veterans. The other ones you've heard about before, the OPEB and so forth, so I won't go over those again. We have the numbers for the retirement assessment, the one for the general fund, and then the overall one, which includes the enterprise funds. That's why there are two numbers there.
Which article are you in?
13.
That's 13.
Got it. Okay, sorry.
Debt service, I can put the number in here that reflects the lower number that we need because of that refunding. There's about a $2,000 savings that we reported when we talked about debt service before. Library services are both the town appropriation and the overall budget voted by the trustees. I would just note that there's a $1 difference between here and what Sharon passed out. I wouldn't say she was trying to sneak another $1 in there, but
We'll take up a collection.
right.
Did she respond to that?
She said, just go ahead and use the lower number. So, elementary school is pretty straightforward. The regional schools, this is in bold because there's a $3 difference between what was put out in the manager's budget, what we put out in October, and what the school committee actually voted. So I put the larger number here because I don't want us voting the lower number and then effectively not approving the regional budget.
I don't have that number in mind. I have a blank.
No, you're looking at the assessment, I'm down on number,
It's under 16, but D.
16D.
Oh, regional schools. Oh, that's the assessment, right.
okay. The next number is in italics because I'm guessing that when we put money into do the safe and healthy neighborhoods, it will go into conservation and development. It could also go into community services. John has not announced which department will take that, but one of those two is going to have to change, and I will come back with specific numbers next week on that once John has announced that. The other numbers are straightforward, except general government, it's the same issue. We'll have to add some money for health insurance for the people who are hired for the Health and Safety Neighborhoods Initiative, if in fact that goes forward. Then the sewer fund is in bold because that's also lower than what's in the manager's budget because of the refunding, or not the refunding, but the actual bond sale results. Everything else is from the manager's budget, and then the JCPC numbers are here. I would say if we have to make some adjustment to JCPC for dealing with the 60,000 deficit, that might come down $6,000 for the one item that was on the potential drop list from JCPC, but otherwise these will be the same. And then there's the CPA numbers that are just right out of the CPAC. So there are a number of things, a lot of these articles are related to the ones that are not in bold, the ones that are not in italics are ready to be voted whenever the committee wants to vote them. And again, I just said that one caveat about the JCP numbers, JCPC numbers.
I wanted to put this out to have everybody get a chance to look at it. I'm not urging a vote tonight because April 10th is when the House Ways and Means Committee is going to release its budget, and if it does something in its budget that is significantly different than what we expected, then we might want to talk about it before we vote a budget, because we have to make sure that we're not only voting a budget, but that it's a budget in balance. But I did feel it was helpful to get this out here tonight, and that's why it's here.
One of the things we also discussed is maybe instead of doing a series of individual motions on each of these, if we had a table like this and moved, if it was the will of the committee to support all of these, just to move it as one motion with the individual numbers within a table.
At least for 16.
Right.
Did you bring the numbers for 3 tonight? The optional tax exemption? Because I have that all written up and ready to go.
That is, I thought I gave you the number.
You did, I have it. It's all finished, I just don't have our vote.
Oh. So that's the numbers. The committee doesn't have to vote a number. They just have to vote. The town meeting just votes the acceptance. They're not voting the cost. Okay. There's no appropriation. It's just a matter so that letter is really a matter for the explanation, the finance committee report.
Right, and I've done that. Everything's done.
So
except your vote.
We didn't take a position, what you're saying.
What?
You're saying we have not taken a position.
We have not taken a position.
Yes, Kay, or Janice, go ahead.
Okay, so if we have to have our reports to Kay by next Thursday, and we will not have voted, do you just fill in the votes afterward?
You could send them Friday.
I can't, I'll be gone.
I think that at this point you should make it with the assumption that the number is what's here, because it's the best. It's reasonably likely that this will be the number.
But
yeah, we don't know the votes. Yeah. I'll put in a vote and then you can change it if it's wrong.
Right. Yeah, the vote you done. And how we voted, if we voted as a block, then everything under the article will be right up on top for that, for the main budget article.
The FY14 operating number, just one
Yeah.
vote maybe.
Okay?
What was I gonna say? Oh, I was gonna move that we recommend. What was that?
The
Article 3.
tax
Article 3,
exemption.
the optional, thank you, the optional tax exemptions.
Okay, so Kay's made a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion needed on the motion? All in favor indicate by raising hands. Okay, so it's 6-0, one member absent.
Thank you.
The other thing that we'll have to take up is the order of the motions is the standard issue that we seem to have evaded. Last year what we had done, I think, was to sort of do 2 drawings. This year we have an additional thing they have to consider is a request from the chair of the regional school committee, Mr. Fonge, would, if at all possible, like to be here on the night that we consider the regional school budget, in case there are questions about the budget, and also possibly be a part of the superintendent's presentation. And so when we get to that, we have to decide whether we want to make a deliberate decision to put schools at the end of budget consideration to
Could I,
make that more likely. Yes.
Is he asking to present with the superintendent? That usually is the officer from Amherst that does that.
That's up to them, and I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. That's
We
historically been the way, because the Amherst chairs have never gone to the 4 towns, or 3 other towns to present.
Ultimately, it'd be a question that the moderator could ask town meeting, and town meeting would have to vote to allow somebody who's not a resident of Amherst to speak, but that's a decision that they have to make. I don't know the answer to your question.
I know Maria is going to speak at this point, because I worked with her, what was it, yesterday. We've been working together on this.
I don't know if he intends to speak or not.
He just said he wanted to be at the meeting.
Because he did just say he wanted to be.
At town meeting when the budget's presented.
But he
Oh
didn't.
yeah, I think he was there last year.
Yeah.
Somebody was.
So
So
he can't be there the first 2 nights of town meeting. That would be why he's requesting that we put schools to the end of Article 16 to make it as likely as possible that he would have that opportunity.
Let's, you know what year did we put the schools off forever and ever and ever? And we said this year, or the following year, I don't know if it's this year, but the following year, we were going to move them up front. They came, I think, 2 nights in a row, the 3rd night.
Well, we did it last year,
Was it
and what
last
happened
year?
was that we took a vote. What happened last year is we first drew straws, so to speak, had a random drawing between schools, library, and municipal, and then we used that to establish the order, and it just so happened that the schools drew number 1 of 3. And then we did a second drawing, which was within the other lines, within the municipal lines, we did a drawing, except that we left general government last and public works second to last, so it was only a drawing of 3. And the reason is that it made it as likely as possible that public works would be paired with the enterprise funds, and general government we always put last because it has benefits in it. The other thing that I should mention to you is that Sandy said to us a few minutes ago about an additional safe and healthy neighborhoods position, and it could possibly be under community services and possibly under conservation and development. depending upon how the town manager decided he wanted to place that person. The funding for that position would be out of fees from Article 29, so we have this rather peculiar situation that we do have to recognize that if Article 29 does not pass and then the fees are not generated, in order to have a balanced budget, we will have to move to reopen the Article 16 to delete the funding that we included. But that was the only way to do it, other than to put the budget later, which has generally not been something that the moderator has wanted to do. And Mr. Pistrang, who's not the moderator, but is speaking from that role at the moment, wants to do it this way, I believe. Yes.
So as far as our position, though, we could vote it, and we've done this in the past with and without override type budgets, that we could vote both numbers essentially in one motion for ourselves. Could we not? I mean, we've done that in the past where if the sort of contingent budget, obviously, on the floor town meetings can be different, but
Or there'll be a motion for a specific amount on the floor.
right.
I can't do a contingent because the contingency won't be known until after we've adopted the budget.
No, I know that. I'm saying for our own recommendations for town meeting, we could do it we could have both numbers in a single.
We could vote
Motion to
something.
recommend.
Yeah, I assume that what you're thinking, say if I'm not stating it correctly, that we would support the higher number, but indicate that if Article 29 doesn't pass within the same motion or same time, be saying that we support going back and reducing the budget accordingly.
Right.
You just you have to reduce the area plus the bottom line.
That's correct.
If you reduce the area plus a little bit of general government, and you have to reduce the bottom line. So it is a complicated problem.
Right.
Yes.
So, going back to voting like a block, I guess the motions will still be on each area though with a certain amount, right? So I think that's the way we should vote it.
It would be presented as a table. It would be somewhat similar to the way that the CPAC thing was done if we did it this way. It would only be for the purposes of our motion. It would be invisible by the time you got it. It's just a matter of efficiency and a favor to the minute taker of the night, but you would be adopting a motion that has the bottom line and each number incorporated underneath it, all in a single motion.
So, for instance, I'm going to present Public Works. So do I talk about the amount for Public Works?
Yes.
Or is it just lost?
Yes, no, it's there.
No, we have to have the amounts for each of the functional areas.
Okay.
It would be just as if we said, I move that we approve all the numbers on this list, that we recommend them all. You
Okay,
just did
so
that
they're
in one
still
vote.
separate, really?
Yeah.
They're still separate lines.
And if for some reason we needed to take up a particular number, if for some reason if I decided that I really disliked, I don't know.
Public safety, go ahead, get yourself in trouble.
I don't know. A particular item we could seek to divide motion or something like that if one of us felt passionately that one of the numbers was really egregiously wrong or something like that. I wouldn't, but I would do that before we made the overall
Isn't that
motion.
that they not actually save time the first time we do it?
Right.
Because we're all gonna be a little confused about it, but
Right.
it's worth trying.
Is it just the financial numbers we're talking about?
Yes.
Or are we talking about everything?
The budget.
Just
The only reason that I can think of, and it is a significant reason, Sandy, is that Doug usually abstains on school budget votes, and by not separating out the two school budget lines, that presents a problem. So we may need to construct the motion in two parts, which I don't think is a problem. But I do think that's something to consider.
Yep.
So, anything else on this? Questions here? Because I have one other thing to report, and then I'll just go around and see if we have anything else in the way of reports or things from the committee, and we can adjourn because it's late. Following up on Ms. Berg's presentation from the last meeting, I did make attempt 2 telephone calls and successfully completed one of them to gather information, and I actually found a significant piece of information. I tried to call the chair of the Transportation Committee, Public Transportation Committee, and she did not call me back yet. I did also have a fairly extensive conversation over the weekend with Ms. Zoll, who's director of the Survival Center. And I think that there were 2 things that you should know from that conversation. One is the Survival Center does not support the article, and she does not believe that the amount of money that is being requested is the best way to solve the problem that has been identified, and so that the Survival Center does not support that article. The other
Is that the director? The director?
it's not in that packet because it was in the it was one from last week.
They're Article 37, that's what I was trying
is
to
it?
get at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing that was in there is the way the article is written poses actually a problem, because it was presented as $30,000 to extend the bus route number 31, the UMass Sunderland South Amherst bus route. Well, in fact, 31 is not the bus route that they have been talking about with PBTA. The discussion, what had happened is that Ms. Zoll actually did have a conversation with PBTA about this, and they said they did not want to amend the route of number 31 because, as I pointed out last week, it has a huge ridership going up to Sunderland, and it needs to have an efficient route. The proposal was that they talked about was to amend Route 32, which is the town-sponsored bus route that goes through Cushman and goes from South Amherst up to Cushman. And so it was Route 32, and the reason for the amount was not because of the extension. The reason for the amount was that the bus currently doesn't run in the middle of the day when it's close to the program times when people most frequently need to get to the Survival Center. So the only way to get bus service to the Survival Center at the time that the a bus would go by would be to add a run. And $28,000 was the number that was given to the Survival Center as the cost of adding a whole entire additional run to route number 32. And that's why the Survival Center then concluded that $32,000 in adding a bus run for an entire run from South Amherst to Cushman, and having that paid for at the behest of the Survival Center was not something that they thought that they could ask for, and that's why they're not supporting it. So that's my supplemental report.
But the article says, Article 30, Route 30.
It says bus route 31.
31.
That's an error.
Oh.
How do they feel about the people who have to walk a third of a mile that once a month when they get packages?
They are looking for other solutions to that, I think that they're in some active discussions about other ways to address it, and so that they aren't they aren't ignoring the problem. They do think that it is a significant issue. As for the other thing that I asked her was whether they had done any study that would help determine the need, the number of people who they've lost from being able to access survival center programs because of that extra distance, and they do not have that information. It is not a study that they have conducted. So, I will let you know if I hear from the chair of the Public Transportation Committee, or obviously anybody can move at any time to take a position. And if not, I'm going to... Yes, Janice?
I'll move that we not recommend this.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Janice to not recommend, and a second by Mary Lou. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising hands. Okay, so it's motion 6-0, one member absent. Are there any other reports from the members have regarding boards, committees, or other work that they have done on the committee's behalf? And you have been working to schedule a meeting of people who are interested, and I gather that we're still under a quorum.
Yes, well, yeah, so I'm going to actually, make a doodle like I mentioned in the email, last one, and then if 4 or more people sign up, then we'll have to make that an announcement. If fewer then sign up, then we don't need to do that now. I'm just thinking about doing this at this point, depending on what Sandy's schedule. Sandy is a key person here. So Sandy's schedule is maybe the week before. Maybe during that week itself, the week of the 21st, maybe it is, yeah, something like that. So that, our discussion is fresh when we go to the meeting. That's what my thought is.
So it'd be early in that week.
It'll be sometime early in that week.
I will send you guys something by email to let you know the date that the select board is having a reception in honor of Harrison and Greg. I decided that it was inappropriate for the finance committee to participate in thanking the person who appointed all of us to our positions. So, but we are invited and encouraged to attend the select board's reception.
Do you have a date?
I will, unless you know it offhand.
I do know it. I have it in my calendar. It is the 29th at 5 p.m. in the town hall.
And I'm going to try and get a hold of my 2 predecessors as chairs and invite them to kind of, and if you think of anyone else, Ms. O'Keefe has encouraged us to invite anybody that we think would be appropriate to attend.
5 o'clock, did you say?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, we're adjourned.
No,
No?
we've got 2 sets of minutes, one from October. Could we just approve them?
Move approval.
Sorry.
Were we all present that day? Because that's been a while.
Let me see. Yes, all of us were present on October 25th.
Okay,
All present both days.
Okay, move approval of the first set.
October 25th?
Yes, October 25th.
Second it.
Okay, motion has been made by Mayor Lou, seconded by Janice. For discussion, all in favor indicate by raising hands. Okay, 6-0, one member absent. Okay, what's the second one?
March 21st.
Move approval.
Those are the ones that were reworked from the,
Yes.
and everyone was present from this group.
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
And everybody who told me corrections, I
Made the
added
motion.
in.
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou made a motion and Doug has seconded it. All in favor indicate by raising hands. So again, it's 6-0 and number absent. Anything else? None. Then we are adjourned at 10:35 and it's been a long night.